first of all, I want to say to all, I hope you all had a wonderful, wonderful holiday. I hope you survived not only stuffing the bird, but stuffing yourselves, and you're ready. First of all, this has been a big college football day already itself. Carol, the first game I ever saw in my life, though it was played later in the year, first live sporting event I ever saw in my entire life was on the 17th of September, 1970, on the campus of University of North Carolina, and I saw the Tar Heels blow out the NC State Wolfpack. And Don McCauley went off for like 224, something like that, yards. And then later went on to be drafted by the Colts. Had about an 8, maybe 10-year career, something like that, as mostly a third down back. But you didn't come here to hear me reminisce. But there's a bunch of great rivalry games. Clemson, South Carolina, a bunch of them. The Egg Bowl we're going to break into and break down and talk about a little bit more. But obviously the USC Notre Dame game is a game that I've enjoyed all my life. I enjoyed it particularly when I was younger, back when John McKay was there, because he did fairly well against Ara Parsegian when other people didn't do well against him. And, most famously is the 1974 game that will live with me the rest of my life, rest of my days, where Anthony Davis triggered one of the great comebacks in college football history. But let's stop looking back and start looking forward. So let's talk a little bit about things that have happened since last we met, Brock. So what do you now know that you didn't know the last time we met?
I now know that I know nothing. Thought I knew everything. I was wrong. Thought I knew that Lane Kiffin was going to be this mastermind that was going to take Ole Miss to the next level this season, and I was wrong. I thought Baylor was going to make the college football playoff before the season, and I was wrong. They have now, I believe they're now 6-6 after losing today to the University of Texas. I thought Steve Sarkisian couldn't, win close football games, and I still somewhat feel correct about that. But after today, I don't feel confident in that anymore. And my $50 wager for Alabama to be the 2023 national champions is now looking pretty dead at the moment. So in conclusion, I don't know nothing. And somehow I still feel confident enough to say, without a doubt, that the Alabama Crimson Tide will somehow run the table, and through the debauchery that will be this weekend, conference championship weekend, and what follows that, good Lord, and what follows that will be it'll be enough for Alabama to get in. Also, NC State just completely botched a snap and went 17 yards backfield. So as I do this show, I'm also keeping myself updated with the current games in college football and this North Carolina NC State rivalry, for which you talked so gloriously about you attended the 1970 game, is looking like an absolute dumpster fire. So good times with better people. And my goodness, do we have a show for you guys today?
We do. It's going to be so full it may leak of great content. So I want to poke around at a couple of games that have happened and will happen. And then we have an amazing slate of guests. We have our own MBS media. So Greg will be joining us, right? Who is a diehard Notre Dame fan. Notre Dame has not had great representation on the show for whatever reason this year, but they're going to fix that. We will have Ryan Dunn of One and Done Radio will join us to talk about the Michigan game. And, of course, on the other side of that is friend of the show, Josh Keatley, everybody's favorite guest.
Third appearance joining us, Mr. Keatley.
Right. Well, that's why he's the winner, right? He's now won. So for those who were trying to compete with
finest, I know I mispronounced that.
Right. People were competing, trying to win the number one spot for friend of the show. The second spot is still open, so you can fight for that. But the number one spot is on lock. Ryan Keatley, put that in a box. So let's whip through a few games. Obviously, as you said, you talked about your friend, Mr. Kiffin, and the Egg Bowl. What do you think was at the heart of the Egg Bowl and why it turned out the way it did, Brock?
Jackson Dart. I'm sorry. If you know what I believe in the modern day, if you are Gatorade Player of the Year and then you commit and play at USC, you are automatically a bust. I think I see Keaton Slovis. And now I see Jackson Dart, and it infuriates me to my core because he's so much of a better player than what I saw on last night. That game, Ole Miss had so many opportunities to put that game away, especially in the second quarter, and they missed it. The first one that I really want to talk about is there was a Will Rogers fumbled the football. An Ole Miss DB tried to pick it up, scoop and score, and a Mississippi State, I believe, wide receiver ran all the way back in a diving effort to stop him, and I was able to recover the football, leading to a punt and then leading to Ole Miss not being able to capitalize on that opportunity. That the game was basically summed up by Ole Miss continuously not capitalizing on opportunities. Now, has this whole Auburn, Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin thing been a distraction? I don't know. But what I do know is that they played not to their standard, and that's probably the reason why Ole Miss will miss out on another New Year's Six bowl game. They were in a prime position to go. If they won today, they would have been 9-3 at this point. Alabama's pretty much guaranteed an NY6 game. LSU's basically guaranteed an NY6 game, and then Georgia, if they win the SEC championship, will go on to the college football playoff. But there's 4 non-CFP NY6 games. I think they could have made it to one of them. A very disappointing end to what was a promising season for Ole Miss that, again, can only be summarized by missed opportunities.
Can't disagree with any of that. My concern about Ole Miss all along was how they would handle games where essentially they got challenged and somebody could turn it into like a gut punch match, right? If you could, if you can get them to, if you can close with the enemy, that I think Greg will enjoy that reference, and make them fight at close quarters. And that's not what Ole Miss wants to do, right? And they frankly want to be an aerial circus. They would like to prefer to win an air war, but they don't have the right pilot, right, at the controls. And yes, you nailed it. Jackson Dart is fun to watch and athletic, and we talked about this. He's clearly a guy that was influenced by Johnny Manziel, right? Very. And that influence has not always been a good thing in his game. Will he grow out of it? Well, I guess we're going to find out. But
no, you're absolutely on the head. And let's we forget their running attack isn't as strong as last year either. The loss of Snoop Connor has been, I don't want to use the word detrimental to the Rebels, but has definitely set them back. Now, they have some really good running backs in that backfield, but they just haven't been able to get rolling of late. And you hit it on the head. Whenever a game is within one score entering the fourth, Ole Miss cannot, perform well. On the flip side, we'll talk about Mississippi State real quick. Zach Arnett, DC, he's done a phenomenal job both at Mississippi State and at Washington State under Mike Leach. How his name hasn't been circulating for head coaching job opportunities yet is beyond me. And if Leach loses Arnett, expect Mississippi State to be in a world of hurt entering next year.
Yep. So before we let our guests come on and the watchers, the viewers can unwrap their first present, it might be time for a super, super interesting, super important message that everyone should enjoy.
In 2006, we founded Yeti Coolers with a simple mission: build a cooler we use every day if it existed. One that was built for the serious outdoor enthusiasts rather than for mass discount retailers. One that could take the abuse we knew we'd put it through, out in the field and on the water. One that simply wouldn't break. We decided early on that production innovation would come from necessity and first-hand experience, not from market research and data analysis. Today, Yeti products perform when it matters most. Whether that be an excursion into the remote Alaskan wilderness, chasing redfish on the Gold Coast, or just getting together with friends in the backyard, we make gear that helps you stay out longer, travel farther, and live harder. # built for the wild.
So, this is exciting on so many levels because we get to talk about some of my favorite things to talk about on the show with some of my favorite people. And we've been joined by one of those top favorites. So I have known Greg for 3-ish years, I think. I think somewhere around that. And I have had a chance to hear him hold court, and he gets to have his opportunity to defend. And first of all, I want to say this. Though I am very much a person that has grown up rooting for USC, I have always had great respect for Notre Dame as a concept, as a program, and even the way that program is run, particularly now. Because a lot of people got very nervous I won't get into some of the dynamics around their coaching hire, but I heard whispers about some of the boosters not being entirely on board, especially when they struggled, there were some of those things sort of percolated up. But it looks like the ship has been righted, and I'll let Greg talk about sort of where Notre Dame is heading into what shouldn't be one of the biggest games of the year, because it doesn't really matter. Notre Dame isn't in a conference, and it matters, I guess, only really for prestige and pride. But those are two good things.
There we go. How you guys doing?
Great to see you, Greg.
Good to see you guys.
So tell me what the mood is, and what are the things you guys are looking to see if you feel like this is a game you can win. What has to happen?
Well, for Notre Dame to win, it's going to be good old smash mouth football. They have to keep the ball in their hands, keep Caleb Williams and his receivers off the field, and beat them up with their defense as well. They got to get the job done on both sides of the ball to have a chance.
Yeah, I once again, nothing there to disagree with. My concern about Notre Dame coming into the year wasn't the coach, it wasn't all this stuff. I was concerned about the quarterback play. What is your read on the quarterback situation now at Notre Dame?
Well, it's the same old thing, right? We've got 3-star guys when the other programs have 5-star guys at quarterback. That's been a problem for ages when it comes to Notre Dame, is getting the quarterback.
Yeah, which is fascinating to me, because in the past, if you go far enough back, they were a bit of a factory, right? Which that factory seemed to go out of business sometime in the late 1980s and has not been able to really get back going for some reason.
I mean, we had the Joes, we had the Thiesman.
Thiesman at the time, yes.
Yes, he changed the pronunciation, and Montana, of course, and those sort of quarterbacks would come to Notre Dame, right?
Right.
Been far too long, and that's one of the reasons why it's been since 1988 since they've won a title.
Sure. I'm going to open it up to my co-host, Brock. I'm sure you have questions for Greg about the state of Notre Dame heading into a game that, like I said, it matters maybe not so much for, obviously, like I said, the prestige and the pride. This is not a college, football playoff championship year for Notre Dame, though they could deprive, obviously, USC of a chance to make the playoffs if they win.
Well, first, I want to get started by saying thank you for calling the show, Greg. Greg has, in the short time we've known each other, which I would say dates back to probably last year's draft, he has been a phenomenal friend, a phenomenal guest of the show, and it's great because my hatred for the University of Notre Dame and the Dallas Cowboys is able to fester because of Greg's love for those two football institutions. Yeah, I know. Congratulations to your Cowboys for absolutely smoking the Giants in the second half yesterday on Thanksgiving. But going back to Notre Dame football, in your opinion, I said that the head coach wasn't the problem. The offensive coordinator is in Tommy Rees. How do you feel about Rees heading into this game and his time at Notre Dame in general?
Well, Rees has done a better job as the season's progressed. That goes without saying. And again, it comes down to the actual talent that they've had on that side of the football. Again, outside of Michael Meyer, the receivers aren't considered to be that great. They've got the tight end, they've got running backs. So, Rees is limited as to some of the things that everybody wants to see in our programs these days, like when you go see Ohio State and their bevy of receivers and all that good sort of stuff. That's not there. So can you blame Tommy Rees for that? No. But on the other turn of hand, I can blame him for some of the play calls and things like that we've seen throughout the year. But again, he's growing in the position as well. He's quite young at it, so give it a chance.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
As it now, they look like essentially the Iowa of Stanford's, right? In terms of the way that they go out and their offense is so much built around running game, the tight end, attacking the middle of the field, the occasional screen, the occasional draw. Even their trick plays are like, how to put this, not very tricky. There's.
And it all goes back to not having the guys you got Drew Pine there. Drew Pine wasn't supposed to be the quarterback this year. It was supposed to be Buckner, right? He gets hurt. So here you are with Drew Pine now. that's what comes with the territory, though, right?
Right. Okay. Sorry to horn in there, Brock. What's your next question for Greg?
No, absolutely. I'm glad you guys set that up because the next question was the quarterbacks. Now, Greg and we've talked extensively about this off camera, and Greg, you have always said the reason why Notre Dame can't land a quarterback is there's a multitude of reasons, but one is the high academic standards for admission at Notre Dame. With that being said, Stanford has been able to recruit some top level quarterbacks in the years past. What does Notre Dame need to do to be able to change that rhetoric when it comes to recruiting quarterbacks?
I think they're going to attempt it now. I think the Marcus Freeman was very clear. He didn't want to upset the apple cart with what they had for this year's senior class. So they weren't very active in the transfer portal. I think that changes. I think Notre Dame goes after a big name quarterback in the portal. And again, they're going to try obviously to recruit for the future a quarterback as well. But yeah, they're going to get a quarterback in the portal.
Are there any names that you like right now for Notre Dame?
It's too hard to say at this point because we don't know everybody who's going to go into the portal, right? There's names that are out there that are suspected. I mean, some people even have Quinn Ewers leaving Texas and doing a second transfer portal because Arch Manning is headed to the Longhorns, right? So who knows?
Absolutely. Going back to this present game against USC, if you guys would be able to knock them out, that would be the second top 10 team Notre Dame would have beaten this year. Of course, the first one would be the absolute drudging of Clemson. What does Notre Dame need to do to be able to get the job done?
Well, like I said, their defense has to get to Caleb Williams, and then offensively they have to keep the ball in their possession as long as possible. And of course, you got to get turnovers. If you get turnovers, then it's a game that they can stay in, right? You can't allow USC to go wild.
Absolutely. Bill, you guys anything to say? Or
I was going to say, in your mind, what's the largest number of points that they can come? Like, if they get down 10 points, they're probably still okay. But it's 17 too many? Is 14 too many?
14.
Like, what's 14?
14. I would say 2 touchdowns, and then they're in big trouble.
Okay, got it.
You know, that's just the way these games tend to be, right? It's not often that we get blowouts either between the two, right?
Yep.
Normally the games are pretty close between USC and Notre Dame. 1966 would be an exception, 51-0 for the Irish. We'll take that one.
Yeah, the next year, O.J. Simpson had something to say about that, though.
Yeah. There was that guy whose name isn't too popular.
It's not popular for many reasons, but
and as you mentioned, Anthony Davis in the 70s, and then we had Reggie Bush. Yeah.
I think Joe McKnight ran in you guys one year. I think Lendell White had a really phenomenal performance.
Okay, that's enough.
Well, I'm going to let Brock. We got simply provoking Greg. Would you like to ask him a question?
Oh, sorry. I keep forgetting we're on camera and now we're just like casual conversation per usual. No, but next question for Greg is: how did you feel when Marcus Freeman was named the interim and then was given the full-time job as head coach? And what do you expect from him in the future in terms of both not only recruiting but defensive philosophy heading forward?
We're in the 21st century. That's what I thought when they made him interim, and that's what I thought when they named him the head coach. We hit the 21st century. Let's have at it. Let's go.
So you weren't disappointed they didn't get Dan Mullen or Bob Stoops or something?
Nope, absolutely not. Not at all. I thought when you saw the reaction of those students, and that this was student driven, those players had a lot to do with this happening.
True.
And when you saw their reaction to Freeman, okay, we got the right guy. Now let's go ahead and improve the Fighting Irish.
Okay. Yeah. And Stoops is Catholic, right? I believe.
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe he is.
Not that matters. I mean,
No.
they have hired some non-Catholic head coaches.
Well, I know, but
Exactly.
Notre Dame, They really like to. I'd like to add that the reason my hatred for Notre Dame exists because I was a Catholic school my entire life. So of course, all the priests and the nuns and the brothers are all Notre Dame fans. So that's why that this exists. Also, the 2008 Hawaii Bowl win, your Irish smacked the poo out of my Hawaii Warriors. But that's beside the point. Moving forward, how did you feel about Brian Kelly leaving? And did you ever feel comfortable with Brian Kelly being the head man at Notre Dame?
Brian Kelly was fine. I mean, he was fine for Notre Dame, right? He was a typical Notre Dame type of a hire. He just wasn't able to get them over the hump. I mean, we got to the playoff, but of course, when you get to that level and then you run into Mr. Saban, good luck, right? So, it is what it is. I didn't have anything one way or the other with him leaving. I understood why he left. LSU being an SEC school, the recruiting possibilities and all that sort of stuff that goes with it. It's a different type of process for LSU compared to Notre Dame when it comes to all of that. And so, c'est la vie. Wish him well. See you later.
Perfect. And you brought up a great point was that recruiting standpoint. Now, something you mentioned before and has been evidence as a time there was that Notre Dame could never recruit elite level cornerbacks. Do you think that would change under Marcus Freeman, or do you think things will stay the same?
No, it already is. It already is changing. They're getting 4 stars. They're getting 4-star corners who are commits. Let's get a 5-star in there if you can, but we're getting the 4 stars, and that's a big change right there. That's a step up.
Absolutely. That's questions I got for Greg at the moment, because if I continue, I'm going to start talking trash about Notre Dame, and it's going to go to an hour-long argument. So, Bill, do you have anything to ask Greg?
I do. So, as you mentioned, the Midwest is – I live in Chicago. You live in Canada.
Yep.
So we both know that there are places where quarterbacks flock, right? If you were to do like a spray chart, like you do in baseball, of where the top quarterbacks come from, both in terms of where they grew up and then the schools they've selected. Lots of little dots in Texas, clumps of dots in California, a sprinkling of dots in places like Maryland, North Carolina, Virginia, sprinkling of dots up and down the other parts of the West Coast like Washington, Oregon. And then when you get to like Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, there's a few dots. It's not dotless. But oddly enough, there's more dots in like the state of like he grew up in Florida. Trey Lance grew up, not in Nebraska, not in North Dakota. But North Dakota has now put 3 quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yeah.
2 of them are from the area, and one of them is clearly not, obviously, but still, that's 3 quarterbacks. 2 actually grew up in that area, and 1 who, got recruited there. It seems odd that there'd be more, guys who are getting starts in the NFL from North Dakota State University, where there's no recruiting advantages there. Like it's not warm. They're only on national television a couple of times a year. They have been on game day once, but I think at some point, coaching and development can overcome all those disadvantages that we just rolled off, right?
And it's been the one position that has always been a problem for them to develop. There's been guys who are good, but you don't see them go from being that good quarterback to very good, or better yet, excellent. That's just something that just has not happened for the Irish.
Really? I thought Jimmy Clausen was a savant.
Oh, come on now.
I'm sorry. I know.
That was both unnecessary and somewhat funny. But
personal foul, automatic ejection.
Targeting. Get me out of this stadium.
Targeting my one and only feeling.
Yes. So
yes. I
would like to talk about the one place where I think you have a distinct advanced offensive line.
Yep.
USC's offensive line is better than it was because they were quite poor for 2 seasons in a row. And though they've improved, they can't touch Notre Dame. So I assume that you want to press that one advantage. Are there particular run game concepts you think would work particularly well against USC's front that wants to rush the passer and is less excited about stopping the run?
Well, obviously, I think Notre Dame can run. I think they can run inside and outside. Particularly inside against USC. Notre Dame center and guards are nasty. So I would look for some inside traps. I would also look for them to try to bounce out to the right side, particularly against USC.
Okay. And since you mentioned the right side of the offensive line, who are the players, especially on that right side of the offensive line, that you think can make a name for themselves? Obviously, pro scouts will be in abundance anyway for both teams. But I think that, as we just talked about, I think there's some guys on the right side of that offensive line for Notre Dame that are Sunday players. Who are your favorites?
Well, obviously, the center is the number one favorite of everybody this year. Patterson is definitely going to get himself drafted here fairly early. I mind Jolt. And again, you got Jared Patterson. Obviously, the other guy that gets attention is Joe Lugg. Those are the three guys that get the bulk of the attention, right? They've done it, and they've done a good job.
Okay, and that makes sense. Did you have any more questions before we go to our next commercial break, Brock Vieira?
I did. Come few ones. None of them insulting. All of them have to do with the game plan and scheme for the football game. So obviously, USC had a tremendous loss 2 weeks ago. We lost Travis Dye for the season. That has led USC to have to rely on Caleb Williams and that passing attack more. How does Notre Dame take advantage of that situation?
No, they're going to use Michael Mayer. I mean, that's Michael Mayer is the absolute key for the Notre Dame offense. He's the guy that if they get third and longs, he'll be the guy that the Notre Dame keys to keep a drive going and all that other sort of stuff. I think he's the biggest key to the game because if they can keep the drives going again, that clock keeps running and Caleb Williams is on the sideline. That's the biggest factor in this game. Can Notre Dame keep the ball away from USC? That's the bottom line. It doesn't matter who USC has on the field. That part doesn't matter. This is about Notre Dame dictating the tempo of this game. Slow it down. Keep that clock moving. That's their biggest opportunity to beat USC.
Absolutely. So in USC's last several contests, they've given up 43 to Utah, 37 to Arizona, 35 to California, 17 to Colorado, and then 45 to UCLA. With that being said, we already talked about Michael Mayer and moving the pace forward. Could we see an offensive explosion for the first half of the season for Notre Dame, where they put up 35 to 40 points? Are they just not?
Well, I mean, they put up points against Clemson's defense, and I'll say Clemson's defense is a whole lot better than the USC defense, right? And again, it comes down if Notre Dame does get a couple of turnovers, they could pile it on scoring wise, right? Especially if they end up with having short fields. So.
Yeah, without a doubt. I have one more question for you, and this is looking towards the future. More importantly, next season, Notre Dame has had a tumultuous year to start. Obviously, coaching changes. There's some really bad losses early. They've stayed the ship. And when you look at the recruiting, you and I already talked about it. They're bringing in some 4 or 5 star players. They're going to attack transfer portal hard, and they're really revolutionizing the program. How do you see Notre Dame being a national championship contender entering next season?
I tend to be very conservative on these things, so no. They have to go out there and prove to me that they can, right? Until I see them do those types of things that they need to do to be considered a championship contender, I have to say no because they haven't shown it on the field.
If you don't mind, well, I got one question that's not Notre Dame related.
Okay.
So Greg is one of the best people when it comes to analyzing draft prospects. Him and Bill Carroll. Greg, looking at this phenomenal quarterback class in terms of college athletes, who are your top 3 in terms of NFL ready QBs, and who is your Heisman favorite for this year?
The Heisman favorite right now, you'd have to give it to Williams at the moment. That can change, depending on how he does in this. I mean, if USC wins this, then they got a Pac-12 title game and all that other sort of stuff. Williams, has moved in ahead of the others right now for a lot of people, but still, to me, it's going to be CJ Stroud to win or lose, depending on how he plays against Michigan. In terms of the top 2 quarterbacks, I only have 2 first-round grades this year for quarterbacks at this point, and that's Stroud and Bryce Young.
Perfect. Well, would you look at that, Bill? It's something that Greg and I agree on. Hallelujah.
See,
And
like
do
Ebony and Ivory together in perfect harmony.
But unlike you, I will not and will not put Will Levis as my number 3 quarterback.
Whoa! Hold
chance.
on, time out. I have never had Will Levis in my number 3. You are confusing me with another man. I want to be very clear. I think Will Levis is an absolute bust. I think that he is proving that he is overrated. How he was QB1 entering the season is an absolute travesty. If anything, I have Hendon Hooker as my number 3, but Hooker would have to be a day 2 pick for sure. Do not have a first round bid on here. This man, Greg, is putting falsehoods against my name. Oh my Lord. Help us. Help me.
I just wanted to give you the opportunity to prove that you're not one of these tools guys, and you actually pay attention to production.
Look, I like tools just fine, but yeah, give me Jake Haener if I've got to win a game late over a guy like Levis.
And there's so many other guys this year who will be ahead of Levis in terms of my overall quarterback ratings. So just so people out there already understand, I look at all the factors, not just the pretty ones that ESPN and NFL Network like to highlight.
I would like to add, and this shout out to our good friend Monty, who's a diehard Oregon Ducks fan. Will Levis is this year's version of Bo Nix next year, who was the Sam Darnold version of several years ago. Like a bunch of guys that have the look, but are not going to be great NFL quarterbacks. Or you could put Zach Wilson in that example, but I feel Zach Wilson is so awful that
but that's the one Monty got right. Monty got that Zach right.
Yeah, Monty gets that. But Monty is, I'm not sure what he thinks of NFL, but he is all in on Bo Nix for this year, and it hurts my heart because I've had Bo Nix in the dumpster since Auburn.
Yeah, well, he's an Oregon Duck fan, but as I wrote about in an article about scouting and things like that, you can't just look at the one season, right? You have to look at these guys all the way through. That's why I kept warning people about Kenny Pickett last year. Hello, I saw the first 4 years.
Hey, don't mention Kenny Pickett around Bill. He's still a little hurt about that. You could have had Jermaine, but
my problem was that everyone else got the memo that we're not taking quarterbacks in the first round. How did we not get the memo? What if it was our fax machine broken?
That was the whole thing, and we talked about it over the draft, right? I mean, we did not have a single first-round graded quarterback last year, not one.
Right. Because there weren't any.
There really wasn't.
Okay.
Well, what happened? Pittsburgh saw the ACC championship and then absolutely drooled over Kenny Pickett, and it was a wrap. Oh my goodness! Josh Kennedy is here. These two, Notre Dame, Ohio State. We should have had them come on the first.
Now, Brock, as you know, outside of Notre Dame, USC being a rivalry, the number one school that I despise the most, I never say their name.
Nope.
It is that school up north, and you know it. I will always, when we get talking about that particular game, you always see me put up the Buckeye and all kinds of Buckeye gifts. I despise that school up north.
Yes, hate is a strong term, but an appropriate one for this situation when it comes to this school right here.
So Josh being an Ohio State Buckeyes fan
and a former dominant running back at Valparaiso University.
There you go.
White lightning needs to come.
Hard nose, blue collar, plays the game the right way.
Lunch pail guy, first in, last out.
Last kind of the kind of guy who has a bad game. He's gonna spend a month in the weight room and a month in the film room to get better. This type of guy you bring home to your daughters. That is Josh.
You make me blush. You make me blush.
Woo! So we're gonna take another quick pause for the cause, but I wanted you to get a taste of what's coming, people. That's right. You get to have a mouthful of Josh Keatley. That's what you're about to get. You are welcome.
Pickup is a fan engagement platform that aims to build communities and turn the biggest headlines in sports into free-to-play props while rewarding fans for their hot sports takes. You've likely seen their props on Nuts and Bolts Sports and some of your other favorite online publishers and leagues like USA Today, NASCAR, Flow Sports, and others. Simply make your pick on the Pickup prop and verify your pick by entering your phone number, which you will use to track your picks. In 2006, we founded Yeti Coolers with a simple mission: build the cooler we use every day if it existed. One that was built for the serious outdoor enthusiasts. Pickup is a fan engagement platform that aims to build communities and turn the biggest headlines in sports into free-to-play props while rewarding fans for their hot sports takes. You've likely seen their props on Nuts and Bolts Sports and some of your other favorite online publishers and leagues like USA Today, NASCAR, Flow Sports, and others. Simply make your pick on the Pickup prop and verify your pick by entering your phone number, which you will use to track your picks. Accumulate points and exchange for prizes in their marketplace. Their merch ranges from Fanatics gift cards, cross nets, just in time for...
The Team Nuts and Bolts Sports Store is officially open. Log on to www.teamnbsmerch.com and get your t-shirts, hoodies, polos, all sizes available. Once again, log on to teamnbsmerch.com. Get yours today.
Yes, it is the moment you have all been waiting for. We got flooded with calls, letters, emails, people tying letters to crossbow bolts and firing them through my window.
Yes,
I hope
I
that's what that was
pigeons
about.
with your name written on
Pigeons,
them.
rocks with notes tied to them, all those things, saying, when are you bringing back Josh Keatley? And I said, soon, people, soon. Please, get off my lawn. And it has now happened. We have brought him back. So tell us first, Josh. Now, we brought you on at the beginning of the season, then towards the middle, now towards the end. What things turned out exactly as you expected them, and what things surprised you about the Buckeyes season?
So the defense, I think, is much more impressive than I gave him credit for. I think I came on your show before the season started, before they kicked off against Notre Dame, and I said, hey, we'll see what Knowles can do. But there was a big difference going from the Big 12 to the Big 10. His scheme takes a little bit to put in full force. So I was not expecting the gigantic leap that we've seen. I know that the schedule's not favorable. I know that the schedule's makes that defense look a lot better than they really are. We're gonna get to see it in reality this Saturday. But I still think that there's no argument that they've made marketable improvement. The thing that kind of stayed the same exact way is C.J. Stroud's just magnificent. He's a great quarterback. He's exactly what you want in a college quarterback, and I think he's going to be exactly what you want in an NFL quarterback. The offense revolves around him. I kind of thought that there'd be a larger step back with the absence of Jackson Smith and Jigba, but there hasn't been. And Marvin Harrison Jr. is a freak, a great wide receiver, maybe the best in the country. But C.J. Stroud doesn't get enough credit for getting in rhythm with him, getting a relationship with him, helping him elevate to that level. So those are a couple of the things that I feel have gone in a positive direction.
My concern, well, I shouldn't say concern, but the thing that I had the biggest question about, because I wasn't worried about the wide receiver situation at Ohio State. And I wasn't worried about the quarterback situation, and I wasn't worried about the defense as a whole. But we're used to saying, "Oh man, there's this future first-round pass rusher at Ohio State, and you got to watch him." Yeah. And I looked through the two deep, and I was like,
Yeah.
I mean, he's a good football player. That guy deserves a scholarship, and that guy's going to probably hang around even the NFL for 4 or 5 years. But I was like, I don't see a single guy who's like, oh yeah, NFL scouts are going to go crazy for that guy. I couldn't find that guy. So tell me about particularly the pass rush situation there, and is that guy there and I haven't spotted him, or what?
No, I think that there's a group of dudes that could become that guy, and I think it's either going to be JTT or Jack Sawyer. I think you're seeing the emergence of JTT ever since he had that incredible game against, I believe it was Maryland or Penn. I think it was Penn State. I can't remember.
Penn State, yes, he
that
took
incredible,
over
that
the Penn State
incredible game. Yeah. But before that, you would see flashes. Zach Harrison would have games where it was like, wow, this guy's just an absolute animal. They move up and down the defensive line. They played him in that stand-up spot, and he looked like an absolute animal. Jack Sawyer against Toledo, and he had a couple games as well where it was like, hey, Jack Sawyer really took control. Maybe not in the stat sheet, but he was creating pressure. He was, getting double teams. He was chipping the tight end. There were things that he was doing that were very, very great. Have those guys emerge with the same consistency as former Ohio State greats like Chase Young, the Bosa brothers? No, not at all. Not even close. But I think that you're starting to see it. JTT has been more – their games have gotten consistently better and better and better. And it would not surprise me if Michigan was the game where we see, oh, hey, this is JTT's third, fourth great game in a row. He's the dude. We know he's the dude. I honestly, if I had to put money on it, I'd probably say that's the dude that I'm thinking is probably going to be the next star. I think he's here. I think he's on campus. And I think we might see, if not consistency, glimpses of it on Saturday. Because I think Knowles also puts him in really good position and allows for them to really be explosive and make plays. I think that JTT's the dude, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, he did win a very prestigious Nutty Award from Nuts and Bolts Sports, in fact, for his dominant performance that week. So, I mean, it is the most coveted new award in college sports, in case you were wondering, Josh. And you can tell anybody that I said that. So we have and the other thing you expressed concern about was the linebacker group. I remember when you came on, you were like, ooh, a little nervous. How do you feel about the linebackers now?
Tommy Eichenberg's a stud. I'm so shocked because I can't really figure out how. I think he's just one of those, what do we say? Oh, he's always in the gym. He's a grinder. What am I supposed to say? You know what I mean? Because it's not like there are plays where when he does get beat, it's like, oh man, if he was a little bit faster, he'd probably get that. He fits like this. If he was at Wisconsin, we'd be like, yeah, that's your typical Wisconsin linebacker, right? He's always around the ball. We don't really know why, kind of like Joe Schobert was. But he's a little bit better than that because, we see him shed blockers with tenacity. We see him put guys on their butts. We don't see running backs when he goes to make the tackle. He doesn't lose the battle. He can really stand them up and push them back. He does a lot of things really well that I was not expecting at all. Steel Chambers he's the athletic guy. Steel Chambers is all over the field. The problem with Steel Chambers, though, and a lot of times it's not really his fault. He's kind of if he's chasing a running back out of the backfield, he might get caught up in traffic and get blindsided by a tight end, right? There was actually a couple times it was against Indiana where I thought he was going to have a huge play and the ref got in his way, and it caused him to just lose the step. And I was like, oh man, that's tough. He was about to cut off the running back or quarterback to the outside, out. But he's athletic. He's there. He's a lot better than he was last year. Is he a star? No, he's not a star, but not a liability.
I got it. Looks like we may have some breaking news on Nebraska. Apparently closing in on Matt Rule. Okay, well, enjoy.
Enjoy.
I like the hire. I think it's a good hire.
Okay.
Really? Because Matt Rule thought Charlie Brewer was like the next coming of Jesus Christ for a long time. I don't know. Maybe I'm just have hatred for Matt Rule for some unknown reason. Going to Ohio State, I think JT. I know. Unfortunately, the issue is I have Bill on one side, Greg on the other. The hatred is festering, right? It's festering. I don't know what to shoot out. Getting back to the point, JTT has arguably become the most breakout star, defensive star in college football up to this point. Chris Peterson said that he recruited him in high school because he's a Washington guy. Washington can't pick from Spokane. With that being said, considering all the guys Chris Peterson has sent to the league, considering the performance we see now from Ohio State, do you see him being a Heisman runner next season? And what do you expect from him tomorrow against Michigan or in
You're talking. The Heisman for a defensive lineman is always that's always such a lofty thing to even talk about, right? Because there's so many variables. Because it has nothing to do with whether they're good or not. They got to be on the right team. He's got to have the Penn State game against Michigan, right? There's just a lot of variables. It's not a real award, right? You get it because you're the prettiest girl at the prettiest school. You know, this is how it works. Like quarterback, Travion Henderson or Marvin Harrison Jr. to be up for the award than him. I think he is going to be the next great dude. I think that he is. I'm looking back, like I said, I was on the show and I told you that my career was a guy that I didn't put a lot of stock in. That I thought I didn't want to use the term overrated because I was aware of his high ceiling, but I did not think that he would evolve to this level. And that's embarrassing on my part. This guy that was enrolled later than everyone else. The only guy in college football who enrolled any later was Quinn Ewers. I mean, and he still played a significant amount of snaps last year, and I just kind of treated him like a regular freshman, and I shouldn't have done that for someone who was that late to the game to play that many snaps to still be in high school shape. It's crazy, and I'm embarrassed that I didn't think that this was going to happen. But also, the beginning of the year, he was not, he was getting rotated in a lot. He was not the same JTT he is right now. I think the last 4 weeks he's been on a different level, and I think Saturday he really shows up to play. Is he going to show up in the box score? I don't know. But someone is, whether it's Zach Harrison getting multiple sacks or him. Someone's going to show up, and it's probably going to be a direct result of them overcompensating to block JTT or JTT breaking free.
Yeah. I can tell you this much. I won't mind if JTT is the guy that makes J.J. McCarthy think his name is Janet.
So, Greg, if you have heat in your heart, let it out. Don't feel bad about how you felt about JTT because once upon a time I thought Everett Goldberg was going to win high school. But don't even.
No. See, that was never, ever going to happen.
When he left Notre Dame and went to Florida State, a program that actually knows how to move the ball offensively. But that's beside the point.
Yeah.
The Michigan-Ohio State offense versus defensive matchup is primarily going to be can Michigan run the ball on Ohio State. Blake Corum did suffer that little injury against Illinois last week. He does seem to be good to go, but they're probably going to rely on Ronnie Bell mostly. How do you think Ohio State is going to be able to handle that matchup, considering how effective Ohio State was against them last year?
So it's a completely different unit. Even if the skill isn't top notch, even if this is the best defense on the roster, top to bottom skill wise, the scheme. And Jim Knowles has made changes. And the thing that's cool about him that's really different from the last defensive coaching staff is even when they play terrible teams, even when they play like Indiana and they're up by 40 points, the defensive coordinators and the defensive coaching staff last year or the years prior would just keep doing what they're doing. Like, hey, we're smashing by 40 points. Let's just keep smashing them and end this game. Jim Knowles doesn't do that. He kind of takes his time and experiments a little bit, which I think is really, really good because now you can kind of see what you're seeing on the practice field on the field, right? That's the perfect time to try new stuff, to throw out new guys, and Jim Knowles has no problem switching it up. I think it might have been the game against, I think it was Iowa. I can't remember what. There's been multiple games where I've been there, and I'm like, well, he's got, at the beginning of the game, he had 40 backs on the field. Now he's got 5 defensive backs at the beginning of halftime, or the opposite. Like, he's got no problem switching it up and opening up the second half with a formation that he didn't use at all in the first half, which I think is great. So they're going to definitely have a plan. The question is, can the Ohio State defensive line hold up against the Michigan offensive line? And I think that they're going to have their moments, but the Michigan offensive line, I think, is arguably the greatest in college football. Blake Corum is a really good running back, and I'm not going to bash him, but the Michigan offense, their plan is going to remain the same, and no matter who's behind that massive, quick, athletic offensive line, it's going to thrive. So it doesn't really matter to me if the standing of the game and Blake Corum's injury has no effect on me and my prediction and what I think is going to happen at all. And whether it's him, Donovan Edwards, whoever's running the ball on that offensive line is not going to have any issue. That offensive line's great. And there's a huge gap between how talented that Michigan offensive line is and everybody else Ohio State's playing. But I think that Jim Knowles, I just got a lot of faith in what he can dial up. Are they going to stop us? I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think you can. But I think you can slow them down, and that's when I don't think they're going to slow down Ohio State. I think that's the key.
Scheme is one thing, Josh. The biggest difference to me for Ohio State this year is not the schemes, it's the fact that he has the ability to get his players to buy into doing something different. And he also has such a good relationship with them that they are accountable to one another. And that is the single biggest difference to me. There's accountability there, which wasn't there with the previous guys. And the fact that they will change things up, which I think the players enjoy because it allows them to do more things.
I 100% agree. You saw earlier this season. I was on the show. We were talking about Denzel Burke getting beat like a drum those first couple of weeks. I mean, he was getting beat pretty handedly by the wide receiver from Arkansas State, right? And that guy wasn't bad. But that's not ideal, right? That's not Ronnie Bell, right? So, and they benched him. He had no problem doing that. He made a change. He benched him twice, and now Denzel Burke has played pretty well recently, and now we got multiple quarterbacks, multiple defensive backs that have played pretty well, and they've gotten more time. Jair Brown was a freshman from Troutwood that I really, really liked. I thought he was kind of had some Damon Arnett swag to him. Pre-Raiders rap career, David Arnett. And they were able to get him some time and get that freshman's confidence going. That's something that the previous coach staff would never do. They would leave Denzel Burke out there, and no one would talk about how crappy he was, and they would just let him get toast. And then they would talk about, hey, he shut down Toledo. Hey, he shut down this team. The obvious ones. Knowles didn't do that. Knowles benched him. Knowles worked him in. You'd have Elijah Mitchell. He was the starting middle linebacker last year. That dude barely plays now. That dude doesn't even play now. And Jim Knowles, I don't think he has no problem. There's no, undeserved loyalty, if that makes sense to the guy.
Well, these really aren't his guys, right? And I mean, that turns out to be the same sort of thing when you get to the NFL. You got a new coaching regime. Guys that they didn't draft, they'll just say sayonara to. So he's in that situation where he could say, these are the guys I want. And because of what they did to get him to come up there and that, right, they had to let him do what he wants with that group.
Well, and I think a common problem when you talk about Ohio State coaching, we look at all the bad coaches Ohio State's had in recent years, whether it was coordinators, position guys, is that they don't make changes. And I think that one of the reasons why they don't make changes is because if you're Ohio State, you win 90% of the time just based off your players, right? It's kind of like if you're playing NCAA football, you can simulate it and you win. Right? If your team is a 99 and that team is a 99, well, then you got to play. You got to try to actually win that game. And they had no problem. I don't want to say they had no problem losing those games, but they had no problem going, well, we beat them. He stopped Toledo, he stopped Utah State. Let's see what he can do against Michigan. It's like, well, you gotta look at that. You gotta gauge that. You gotta gauge against your competition. I think it was Jim Tressel would always say, because he was kind of more of an analytical coach. Like, okay, 90% of the time if we run the ball on 2nd and 9, we can get the 3rd down. Well, yeah, that's because 90% of the time you're playing a max. Right, and I think that was a big problem you see from coaching staffs, coaches from the years past that Knowles doesn't do.
Absolutely. So, just to back up your argument about Jim Knowles, looking at his last 2 big performances against opponents with Oklahoma State, gave up 24 points to Oklahoma in the first half. The second half, they would give up 9. And against Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl, he gave up 28 points in the first half, only 7 in the second half, which led to Ohio State's victory. Flipping the script, going Ohio State offense, Michigan defense. Michigan was able to get pressure on C.J. Stroud last year because they literally had 2 first-rounders, Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo. Are there any players on that Michigan defense you're worried about coming into this game, Josh?
No, not really. That Michigan defense is not the same Michigan defense. Aiden Hutchinson was not just he's not your classic, Kayvon Thibodeau, Jadeveon Clowney dude. Like, he was like an emotionally driven engine. Like, that guy wasn't going to be stopped, and David Ojabo was a great player too. And then, there were a lot of pieces there that were just extremely overwhelming. And then the offensive line at Ohio State was extremely underwhelming. We talked about that last year too. They had Darren Munford kind of playing out of position. They had people moved around. They had Paris Johnson playing out of position. This Ohio State offensive line, I do not think it's not as good as Michigan's offensive line. I want to be very clear about that. But it is much improved from last year. Paris Johnson is elite. Juwan Jones is elite. Donovan Jackson has a very high ceiling. The big issue on the offensive line now is Matthew Jones and his injury, right? Because, first of all, when he's been healthy, and this is a guy I thought was going to be a top 5 guard by the end of the year. That has not happened. He has had moments where he's been getting beaten like a drum. And then with this injury, it kind of scares me. So we'll see if they play Enoch Mahi, who is a guy that I think has a high ceiling and plays very angrily. That might be what they need against Michigan anyways. But that defensive line of Michigan is not the same. It's not the same as it was last year. There's some good guys. I mean, there's some dogs. It's Michigan. But if you take the defensive line got worse, the Ohio State offensive line got better. So that's not a concern for me.
Excellent. And just to add to that argument, Jackson Hill is also a first-round safety for Michigan, and Mike McDaniels was the DC last year, now with the Baltimore Ravens. Now, Ohio State is known for the running backs. You talk about the Heisman winners like Archie Griffin and Eddie George, who retired recently, like Ezekiel Elliott or J.K. Dobbins. This year, you have had 2 running backs that have similar but also kind of differentiating styles. Do you see any of them having a breakout game tomorrow against Michigan?
So I hope and pray that Mayan Williams is ready to go, dude. Because I do think that Mayan Williams is special. I think we talked about that last time I was on your show too, where I don't use the word overrated. I never want to use that word. It's not fair to because a lot of times it's not fair. It's not a fun word to say. But TreVeyon Henderson gets a lot of hype and has not lived up to it. Okay, Mayan Williams is the dude. He breaks tackles. Is he as explosive? Is he as smooth when you watch him? No, not at all. And he gets caught from behind. But he makes it to the second level with consistency. He's like a bull in a china shop, and he will bust it out, and he will get you your 3 yards, and he is an absolute dog. He is the dude. He is the lead back. He is a difference maker. TreVeyon Henderson, I don't know if there's much. I don't think that there's a big gap between him and Dalen Hayden, if at all. I don't know if there's even a gap between him and Xavier Johnson. Xavier Johnson catches the ball really well in the backfield, obviously as a wide receiver. And Dalen Hayden runs the ball really well between the tackles. He's got a really old school flavor to him, kind of like Mayan Williams. He's going to get his 3 or 4 yards and move the pile. You know, he kind of reminds you like. You talk about all those running backs in Ohio State history, but some of those best running backs in Ohio State history were the guys that just never lost a yard, like John Brocky, Jim Otis, and he's very much in those guys. Bob Ferguson, he's very much in those kind of light than he is, the slash and I'm going to get 20 yards, no yards. He's going to get his 4, which I like. I think it's great. I think that's all you need because you're going to throw the ball. You're going to throw the ball, and then you're going to run it when you need to. He can get you the yards. So you don't really – I don't think TreVeyon is – I don't think having him is life or death. Mayan's
Absolutely. I got one more question for you. Obviously, we've talked about the Ohio State wide receiver room since, the dawn of time, especially since Brian Hartland has taken over. Not only as wide receivers, coach recruiting wide receivers. Obviously, Jack Smith and Jimba has injury issues. Marvin Hassan Jr. has taken a massive step up. And the rest of that wide receiver room, do you see a guy being an X factor for tomorrow or a guy we should see?
Marvin Harrison's the X factor. So Emeka Egbuka is great. Emeka Egbuka is dangerous in space. He breaks a lot of tackles. I could see him being an X factor on special teams. He's always a threat to bust him. A punt return for a touchdown. He's the dude. They can run the screens to him. I can see him busting that. Emeka Egbuka is more than capable of breaking the game open. Has he done that recently, though? Not necessarily. He kind of just does what he does. He does it well. Julian Fleming, you could maybe classify him as an X factor because if he just caught the ball with more consistency, he'd be the dude. We'd probably be talking about him as a first-round pick, but he had a rough ever since the Northwestern game. He's had moments where he has looked pretty rough. He had one big, I think it was like a 3rd and 9, and he caught a little crossing route against Maryland this past week. But that he wouldn't get open. They basically ran a pick, and he didn't really beat the defensive back. Emeka Egbuka, picked him. I haven't seen him play with the dominance that you saw him play early in the year. So maybe he's fully capable. He's big, he's fast, he's strong, he's healthy. I think he could. Kate Stover is another guy that I think could be an X factor because not just because he's good, but because Michigan. It's hard to prepare for that because he's not a in-your-face part of the offense, right? He's very much oh shit, we forgot about Kate Stover part of the offense, right? So I think that how do you prep for a team that's literally never used that position before, ever in the last 20 years you played him, and now all of a sudden they use him with pretty regular consistency. It's kind of, I could see him having a very underrated, statistically hopeful game, kind of like. If you remember Carlos Hyde's senior year against Michigan, he had like 140 rushing yards, but only 1 touchdown, and everybody forgot. Like, man, Carlos Hyde ran for 150 yards against Michigan. That's incredible. I can see Cade Stover having a similar game statistically, but maybe not showing up on that counter.
Well, I'll go with your wide receivers and all that sort of stuff this year at Ohio State. Jackson Smith and his injury was one of the best things that could have happened to them.
Ooh.
I'm serious. C.J. Stroud went from a 1 to maybe a second progression guy. He now progresses absolutely through everything. He uses everybody.
Yeah.
So much like the Kansas City Chiefs had Tyreek and Kelsey, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2. Patrick Mahomes now has 5, 6, 7 options that he goes to all the time. C.J. Stroud became that guy for Ohio State this year. And that's why C.J. Stroud is more than likely going to get the Heisman Trophy.
I agree with that 100%. But I agree with the progression. I agree with the progression of C.J. Stroud. C.J. Stroud is a much more well-rounded quarterback, and I think a lot of that has to do with the Jackson Smith-Njigba's injury. With that said, though, Jackson Smith-Njigba to me was just. I mean, I thought he was better than Olave and Garrett Wilson. I mean, that dude.
This is not anything against Njigba as a player. I'm just talking about for Ohio State, right?
I think that's some of those third and ones, 3rd and 2s, where you see Ohio State struggle or where they get close to the goal line.
It would be nice to have him. It would be nice to have him, right?
Yeah, I don't think there'd be any argument. I think that if Jackson Smith-Njigba was here, they'd probably be the number 1 team because they wouldn't have struggled against Indiana. The offense wouldn't have speed.
But in other ways, it's helped Ohio State this year, and it's helped C.J. Stroud.
Yeah, for sure. C.J. Stroud is a much better, much more prepared for the NFL, and is a much better quarterback. And you never know, too, baby. Like you said, if they come across a team that does. He is more willing to move off as number 1 option with Jackson Smith-Njigba. I just think that Jackson Smith-Njigba, I thought at the beginning of the year, I can't remember if it was here or if it was on another podcast, they said, who's the most important person in this offense? Because everybody said C.J. Stroud. I said Jackson Smith-Njigba because that's how special I thought he was. I thought he had a David Boston-like effect on this Ohio State offense.
Oh, absolutely. But as I said, though, overall, watching Ohio State this year, in the games that I've watched them in, you can just see, and he's loving this different option, that different option. He doesn't have to. He's not forced to go into a tight window and all these other things. Even though Smith-Njigba would probably get in the catch, he's not forced to make those types of plays.
That's fair.
Bill, you got anything?
I do. So the thing that I am interested to see what will happen. You just mentioned, is there another, wide receiver? Will the tight ends get involved? Will the tight ends get invited to the party? And if so, which one do you think might break out and have a couple of touchdowns and 60 yards receiving?
It's got to be Cade Stover. Cade Stover Cade Stover is legit good. Farmer Gronk is legit a good tight end. I think Ohio State has had, I think Jeremy Rucker was a good tight end, but they didn't want to use him for some reason. I don't know if him and Stroud weren't boys. I don't know what the deal is. I don't think the talent gap is that insane. But Cade Stover, for some reason, they give him the ball, and he knows what to do with it. He's aggressive. He's kind of big, strong, powerful. You don't really want to go up against him. You don't really want to tackle him. I could see, and you don't know how to prepare for him either because you don't think of him when you think of the Ohio State offense. You think, okay, how are we going to limit Marvin Harrison Jr.? How are we going to limit what might be a good running game if everybody's healthy? You don't really know how are we going to attack C.J. Stroud. You don't think how are we going to cover Cade Stover? And I don't think anybody's really figured that out. When Cade Stover's on, he's on. The worst game he had was against Northwestern because he had a couple drops, and I don't want to make excuses for him. I didn't make it when I talked about Julian Fleming having drops. I didn't bring up the Northwestern game and make excuses for him because he's had multiple games where he's had consistent drops. Cade Stover, that's the only game where he dropped passes blatantly. That's the only game. Every other time he's been money on the dot. He good. So I think that you can see him have. I would not if you told me that he had 100 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns, I wouldn't be shocked. Now, I think you said 60 yards. I think he's a shoo-in to get at least 50 because there's gonna be points where Michigan just forgets about him because they're so focused on Marvin Harrison. I think, yeah, it wouldn't shock me at all.
So, for those of you who like prop bets, it looks like your boy Josh Keeley may have just hooked you up, right?
Put you on.
Hey!
I've been taking notes.
Oh, the gift that keeps on giving people, Josh Keeley. That's why they keep wanting to have it back on. Ka-ching!
I don't know what that would be a good prop to look up. And you know what, too, if you want me to make a bold prop statement, I don't know what Marvin Harrison's yardages or touchdowns are, but if whatever his yardage is, go ahead and take the over. Because that dude is the dude. Ain't no one stopping Marvin Harrison. He may because that's just no one can stop him. No one can stop him. It's crazy. It's crazy what he can do. No one can stop him.
Who can stop him?
No one can stop Marvin Harrison. It's wild. There's very few players that I see where I'm like, my God, what does that dude eat? But obviously within their realm, right? And I that's my favorite part of the job, Bill, is checking out dudes, right? It's just flying them up and down. But Marvin Harrison Jr., he goes out there and he stretches and runs around. You're like, dude, this guy, he looks like a Madden creative player wide receiver, or he looks like you guys remember it was like the old Xbox game where every single player looked roided up. They were all just jacked. That's how Marvin Harrison is just a weird. He's just built special. He's built different.
Yeah.
And you can
Yeah,
see
I'm sure his daddy being a Hall of Famer in the NFL.
Right.
doesn't help.
His dad's 174 pounds max.
Yeah.
That's what makes it hilarious.
Yeah, but his dad also played at Syracuse in like the 90s when nutrition was
the guy he reminds me of, most as a player is Andre Johnson. That's what he reminds me of. Like I'm not saying he should get a DNA test or anything. I'm just saying that he really, I've seen his dad. I watched his dad's entire college career. His dad was a terrific indoor track guy also, but Marvin Harrison Sr., I think he was not even 170 when he arrived. I think he was in the 160s.
Was he 168?
He was like 168 when he gets to Syracuse and bulked up to 174. So yeah, it's interesting. The genetics are interesting, but I want to ask about the secondary, and then we'll have another little break. Obviously, you mentioned Damon Arnett swag, a phrase I frankly hadn't heard before. So thank you. You may want to trademark that. That Damon Arnett swag line on a t-shirt.
What is Damon Arnett swag? Is it just having
I guess we're about to find out. For all the people who are about to run out and buy the Damon Arnett swag line, what exactly does that encompass? And then tell us about.
I think that's the Damon Arnett swag.
Well, not just that, but also a player who might have a big game in the secondary.
Well, God, I would hope it'd be Ronnie Hickman after he declared for the NFL draft, right? Because I was kind of shocked by that announcement. I think Ronnie Hickman is really good. I think he's one of the heartbeats of the defense. I think he's always there at the right time. He steps up when needed, but I don't think he's. Trying to think of was he Malik Hooker? Like, no, I don't. It kind of surprised me that he declared this early. So I'm hoping he has a big splash game. Maybe he knows something we don't. Lathan Ransom is a super underrated defensive back that is gradually every game he gets better. Every game he does more and more. I think that's probably the X factor. I think he's a little bit better. I think he's got a higher ceiling than Ronnie Hickman. I think he was held back because of injury. Of course, Ronnie Hickman had an injury too. So what do I know? But Denzel Burke, I think he's played a lot better. I get if you're asking me to pick the X factor of the defensive backfield, I think it's Lathan Ransom. But I'm hoping it's Ronnie Hickman.
Okay.
So I'd like to.
Do you think Ronnie Hickman has done some advanced scouting, figured out?
I don't know, man. Does anybody else?
Bill Romanowski was mixing things up in his basement. I was drinking it.
What you guys are draft experts. Do you think it's odd that Ronnie Hickman declared? Is that somebody that you had?
I think he goes somewhere in the top 125 picks. Ish.
I would have him a little bit below that, Bill, in the 150. I got him in the 150. I've got him at 137 right now, I think, Bill.
Okay. I'm not mad at that.
No,
I'm about 14 picks different from you, but it's not a huge difference.
It's relatively close at that point in the game, right? So
either
Especially
way,
yeah.
I can also see because of the way the whole process works these days and all that other sort of stuff, that Ronnie Hickman changes his mind. It could also easily take place. We saw so many guys change their mind last year, right?
well, especially with the NIL that's available in Columbus. I mean, this is a dude that's going to sign autographs. He was at a show 4 months ago and he was making $50 an autograph. You know, is he bringing in CJ Stroud money where the line is around the entire mall? No, but I mean, that's if someone it puzzles me because let's say an agent told him, hey, we think you're going to be a 3rd round pick. You can supplement probably half of what a 3rd round pick would make in a rookie year through autographs in Columbus or through some BS NIL deal with a local bar or something. I mean, his nickname was Rocket. You know what I mean? I know that he was in a local card shop the other day doing a private signing where the guy just gave him a bunch of money to sign autographs. The dude sold the pictures in the store. He didn't have to talk to anybody. You know what I mean? There's plenty of that opportunity. So I was just kind of shocked to see that pop up in a defense that seems to really cater towards the defensive backs like that. You know, they move him around. He's got a lot of freedom. He can do what he wants. So I was just kind of shocked by that. But I don't, maybe he could explode against Michigan. Like I said, I think Lathan Ransom is the one that's most money on the
So you think Ramsey has a better chance to someday achieve, once again, the phrase that pays, David Arnett swag?
So the Damon Arnett sweat. When I was scouting Jair Brown when he was in high school, and he's probably not going to play against Michigan. But the thing about Damon Arnett was not my favorite Buckeye of all time. I think that the Raiders overdrafted him. I think most people kind of thought that. But he was second fiddle to Jeffrey Okudah. And if you go back and watch Damon Arnett, which I'm sure all you guys are familiar with, he was never the fastest, biggest guy, dude. But he was long and he was aggressive. So he had no problem toeing the line of pass interference, and he had no problem letting you know when he won the battle. And I think that there are instances where that kind of got in college guys' head. And there was one, I can't remember what game it was, but he had a very impressive interception where he returned it for a touchdown. Was it in the bowl game? I can't remember. And it felt like leading up.
That was in the bowl. That was in the bowl game. You got it.
Yeah, it felt like leading up to that interception. It was just him just talking trash to this guy. And it was like, man, Damon Arnett was it was almost like he knew he had to make up for what he didn't have. He was not Jeff Okudah. Jeff Okudah was an athletic freak. Damon Arnett was not. He's obviously more freakishly athletic. He would be a star anyway. Compared to Jeffrey Okudah, he's still a freak athlete. Let me just be clear about that. But, he probably could have one corner on this team. But compared to Jeffrey Okudah, he was not the dude. And he made up for it in other factors. And Jair Brown was a lot like that. And a lot, because Ohio State's defensive back recruits of late, even Denzel Burke, were kind of like that. Denzel Burke came in as an athlete and had to overcome a little bit of, the bumps and bruises to get there and just maintain that level of like, hey, I'm here, my head's up high. When I win, I'm going to let you know. And I think that there's something to be said for that if you can keep that confidence. It's a pretty humiliating position to be. So if you can keep your head up, that's half the battle, right?
Could not agree more.
Bill can tell you this from a few years' experience of listening to me when it comes to the draft and all that other sort of stuff. My favorite part is the other guy. Arnett was the other guy because you knew you had an Okudah, you knew he was what he could do, he was elite, and all that other sort of stuff. But you watch anytime that I'm looking at secondaries, my focus goes to the other guy. Like last year, Kyler Gordon at Washington, the other guy with nothing, right? I love the other guys.
He was
Yeah,
one of the best.
look at how your eyes lit up, Greg. That's almost Christmas Day up in Canada at this point. Oh my goodness! Look at
for me. I love watching the other guys so much because they're the guys who are put under the gun.
Yeah.
Teams avoid the Okudahs, right? They avoided Newsoms. They avoided McDuffie.
Yeah. My favorite other guy of all the corners I've scouted is still Darius Slay because, believe it or not, he wasn't the guy. A kid named Jonathan Banks was the guy, and Darius Slay was a JUCO who transferred in. And I was saying, like, what am I missing? Banks is long and aggressive, but he's a little stiff, doesn't have makeup speed. Darius Slay has these great hips, great feet, and can, even cheat a little bit because he knows he's going to catch you, right? I
was just going to say that it was so obvious watching those two, Bill, that the hips on Slay were that's what you want. That's what you dream about. You dream about that.
Oh,
Yes. Well, I can help explain that one for you, Bill. What college did you go to, Darius Slay?
they both went. But Banks and Slay were together at Mississippi State. Yeah.
And who was the head coach of Mississippi State?
At the time. Oh, okay. I know where you're headed.
Well, yeah, that's why. It's because Dan Mullen was the head coach. So I just figured it out for you guys. You're welcome. If you want to Venmo me, my Venmo is Brock_Vieira. It is not tax deductible. That's the point. Going back
if you're playing the Brock Vieira game on College Football Forecast, whenever Brock offends unnecessarily someone's fan base, you have to take a drink. So there you go. Enjoy.
I should be doing it.
Having a big game. This was against Michigan last year. Jack Smith and Jimba had 11 receptions for 127 yards. Garrett Wilson had 10 receptions for 119 yards. And Chris Olave had 7 receptions for 88 yards. Michigan's secondary looks worse. I don't want to use the word worse, but not as good as last year. Of course, Daxton Hill also went to the NFL draft. So expect Harrison Jr. to have a monster day as well. They are playing in the shoe, so that also helps. I would like to say my bet is that Ohio State wins by more than 13.5 points.
Well, hold that thought. Your timing could not be more perfect. Dun, 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 dun.
Oh, no.
One of
Oh, no.
I heard that one right there, didn't I?
Oh,
You have a sense, a flair for the dramatic. I love it.
So, Ryan, I may or may not have hit it on your team before I ever met you, but it is a pleasure to have you on the show, Ryan. How are you doing? My name is Brock, and it is a joy to have you join two Michigan haters in Josh and Greg. So
if you're playing the Brock Vieira drinking game at home, you now must take your second drink, as Brock has unnecessarily trashed a fan base. Okay,
yes.
So
I would like to add, I wouldn't have said that if I knew you were here. I probably would have said that 10 minutes earlier. That was my fault.
No, hey, if you want to say it, say it. I won't. Do not feel that you have to go easy on me. I've been through hell with my team for a long time. I can take it. Don't need to be fake with me.
Yes, but you guys are on the verge of heaven. 11-0, we're headed to the shoot tomorrow to try and go for your second straight win against the Buckeyes. How are you feeling, Ryan, about your Michigan Wolverines?
Before the Blake Corum injury, I was actually feeling really good. I felt we were a very physical team. I still think we are. Last week against Illinois, we did have a lot of guys that did not play. Still did not sit well with me that it came down to a last-second field goal to win the game, but we're here now. It's Ohio State, Michigan. Everything gets thrown out the window. It's mano a mano. We're going head to head. I feel good. We had not won there since 2000. And I think this team is just different. Like this team and last year as well. I think Cade McNamara said it best last year in that game against Nebraska. He said, if you guys remember or not, Michigan had a close game with Nebraska and they won it close in the end. And he even said, he's no disrespect to other teams prior, but I'm pretty sure those teams would have lost that game. And so I think this team is now built different. I think Harbaugh has a different mindset. He seems a little more loose, in my opinion, compared to what he was before. I'm not going to lie. In my show, I did pick Ohio State to win because I'm also a realist. But, I'm confident that we're going to play a close game. 13 points, I heard that. Boy, that was a lot. I think it's going to be closer than that.
Yes.
Ryan, if it helps, I agree with you. I think it's
I agree as well.
I think it's like an 8-ish point game. I think that Michigan's going to slow it down and ugly it up a little bit.
Yeah.
And then a couple of times, CJ Stroud's going to get free, make a play. I think the secret sauce or whatever, if there is one, might be the quarterback run game for Michigan. Talk to me a little bit about what Michigan might do, because that evens certain things out in terms of, first of all, just the math of trying to put your defense together. Tell me about what you might see in the quarterback run game.
You honestly just might see a lot of creativity with J.J. McCarthy. Make sure you do a lot more read option with him. Get him out in perimeter. do like a rollout play action pass where he rolls to his right and get him on the run. He's a very athletic quarterback, and I know lately his completion percentage has not been the best throwing the ball, and I think that's him either sometimes forcing the pass that shouldn't be there or just missing something that's wide open. And I think he knows himself that without Blake Corum out there, which I do believe Blake Corum is going to play, I don't think it's going to be 100% from what I've been seeing and reading. McCarthy has to know that this game's going to fall on his shoulders, with or without Corum, because I don't think Ohio State is dumb enough to just let Blake Corum run for 150 yards on them. I don't think they are. I think they're more physical than they were last year when they came to our place and would beat the crap out of them. I think they are more physical, and I think McCarthy knows that he will have to make plays with his feet, with some, again, read option, quarterback draw, whatever it might be. You got a quarterback that can run. You didn't have that last year with McNamara. We didn't need that last year with McNamara, but now you have that with McCarthy, which when we started him, we know what Michigan offense was with McNamara. McCarthy was supposed to just take it to the next level based on his legs, what he could do. So if he can use that this game, the sky's the limit for how this offense can go. But if Ohio State, I think they'll do a good job containing McCarthy, especially on pass plays, keeping him in the pocket and forcing him to throw. And, we'll see how that works out for McCarthy. Is this going to be the game where he throws for 300 yards and carries the team on his back, or is this the game where, it just didn't work out, and we're gonna find out tomorrow. God, we're gonna find out tomorrow.
Yeah. That is well put, sir. That was very well put. I
have been just dying for this game to happen. And thank God it's at noon, because if this thing was at 7, I'd probably kill myself. But it's at noon, and I'm just so glad it's happening at noon, so it's over with, and I can drink either on a positive note or a negative note. I can just drink the rest of my day away.
Yes.
See what happens.
And kids, in case you're wondering, that's what college football fandom really is about. Either you're drinking because you're happy or you're drinking because you're sad. That's a note from somebody who's seen it all and lived. But thank you so much for that PSA.
Wolverines fan phrase I've heard all year. This is how you know this dude is legitimately a Wolverines fan. Roman Wilson is a guy that I love personally because I'm a Hawaii guy. He played with St. Louis, different Hawaii. Came back from injury, hasn't had a lot of success, only 2 catches in his past 2 games. Do you expect anything from him tomorrow, or what are your feelings about Roman Wilson right now?
I think at this point, he's obviously another playmaker on offense that Michigan has to utilize. When you are going against a offensive firepower team as Ohio State, yes, we have a great defense, and I do think we're going to hold our own on defense against Ohio State. But holding our own against them is 28 points probably. So you got to utilize your playmakers on offense. Roman Wilson is one of our fastest receivers we have on the team. You have to give the ball in his hands, whether it's on a jet sweep, short passes, get him on the run. You got to find a way to get the ball in the playmaker's hands. When you got all the weapons, use them. Don't just restrict them. Oh, we're going to focus on a run. No, take advantage. Ohio State knows you're going to try to run the ball. Use some of the talent that you have on the outside, because, unfortunately, we do. It's kind of sad. We do have a receiver problem for Michigan, and I do think it's a mix of quarterback and receiver. I don't think it's just one or the other. Like, we have some plays where I know J.J. McCarthy could be better throwing the ball. And we have some plays I know receivers can be better running the routes or catching the pass. And so, for a guy like Roman Wilson, who came on the scene really strong this year for Michigan early in the season, and then just hasn't been used that much at all lately. This is going to be a big game, I think, for him. I think they're going to utilize him as much as they can. They're game planning. They've been preparing for Ohio State all year, and I believe we're going to see that tomorrow.
You mentioned we just talked a little bit about the Ohio State tight end room, which used to be, a place for guys that wanted to be flex tackles, basically. And now they have discovered I guess they looked through the rule book and discovered these are eligible receivers, which is exciting news. So tell me about the tight end situation. You mentioned that the receivers aren't always, taking the game over. Might there be a Michigan tight end to look out for?
I think we only have one left. I mean, we
there you
have
go.
we have Loveland, and we
Yes,
had
Carlton Loveland.
Luke
And he's a kid,
Schoonmaker.
right? He's what, 19?
Yeah, he's a freshman. He's phenomenal player. And I just hope that the atmosphere is not too big, the stage is not too big for a freshman like that. Like Luke Schoonmaker was having a great season. He hasn't been there for a couple weeks now. So it's given a guy like Loveland a chance to go out there and flourish and take advantage of the opportunity. But then we also had a guy like Eric All. He's out for the season with a back surgery. Like, it's like we just had like one tight end left. And heck, Michigan's great for the tight ends. They really are. And so I do think Loveland can have a good game. It's just, is the stage going to be too big for him? I don't know. I think as long as he's one of those guys that you want to get the ball open space, let him make something happen. I don't think he's one of those guys that you want to throw the ball up and just have him, go for a 50-50 pass. You want to just give it to him in space and let him work.
So, for those of you who like prop bets, watch out for some tight ends middle screens. So I want to talk also a little about the defensive line. That was the key in my mind to the game last year. The defensive line of Michigan flat out whipped the offensive line of Ohio State. That is unlikely to happen quite the same way, but you still have talent there. Obviously, you have a Yabi Okoye, you have Mazzy, who I think was he the one that made the freak list? He made freak Feldman's freak list.
Mazzy Smith freak list. Yep.
Yeah, right. You have Chris Jenkins Jr., which makes you feel so old, having scouted his father, and then Jalen Harrell. And then you've got some depth guys that I think may have a chance to show up. So take me through who you think might show up and why.
Mike Morris, too. He's actually going to be playing the game as well. It's funny. After we beat Ohio State last year, someone said, it's clearly the offensive line was the only reason why Michigan won. I go, no, the defense was too. No, did you watch the game? I go, yes, and I've watched two previous meetings where we gave up over 50 points and over 60 points. So the defense was huge in the last year's game as well. So thank you for pointing that out. This defensive front, man, they are just a group of, hey, we know what last year was with Hutchinson and Ojabo, and people are going to say, oh, how do we replace those guys? And they just come out with the biggest chip on their shoulder saying, we're going to show you how. So from last year to this year, last year you had those two elite talented guys on the outside. And then middle of the pack was okay. It was pretty good. Nothing against Donovan Jeter and everyone that was there, but it was all right. Now you kind of take a little step back on the outside, but your interior is stronger. So the front four or three or four, however you play for Michigan, is just more balanced. There's more pressure everywhere on the offensive line. Ohio State's going to have to be ready for that. And like you said, the depth that Michigan has on the defensive line is it's phenomenal. You can put 6, 7, 8 guys. You can rotate all these guys in for Michigan, and they will find success, or they'll at least generate pressure, which is what you have to do with C.J. Stroud. When C.J. Stroud has a clean pocket, no pressure in his face, he's gonna shred you. If you don't get pressure, get him off balance, make him feel the pressure in his face, you will have a chance. And I think Michigan can do that.
Okay, fair enough. I've monopolized. Who else has questions for our very special guest, Ryan Dunn of the One and Done Radio Podcast?
Yes, so I have a question. This goes out to both Ryan and for Josh. So the whole point of this game is to keep you guys' hopes for the college football playoff alive, and also to win a Big Ten championship, but more importantly for national championship, right? If either of your teams are to lose, now Michigan's been criticized for the lack of non-conference schedule. Ohio State can say the same, even though they played Notre Dame, but then they followed that up with Arkansas State and Toledo. If either of your team loses tomorrow, do you think both teams can still get in the college football playoff? I'll start with Ryan.
So let's play out the scenario.
Tomorrow, yeah.
Georgia beats LSU.
Yep.
LSU's gone. Ohio State beats Michigan. I think the only way Michigan really has a fighting chance is if it's a close game. If Michigan gets blown out by over 14 points, whatever it is, then it's really going to be hard. USC, if they win out, they're going to find their way in. And TCU, I think TCU will somehow stumble. But would you put let me ask you, would you put a one-loss TCU in over a one-loss Michigan?
So if it's just those two teams, of course I'll put Michigan. But because of nothing other than the fact I have money on Alabama to win a national championship, of course I'll put Alabama in over the both of them.
Alabama, and they should not go in. There's no way Alabama should be in. No way.
Absolutely.
No way. But I'm hoping Saban, greased the palms of the committee and some things work out in our favor so I keep my $50 bet alive. Josh,
I'll probably quit watching football if that happens. I seriously.
Yeah.
And so
kids, gambling is fun, but it's also a disorder and a disease. So there's times when you have to. Once again, we're here to tell you the truth, kids. There comes a time when you say to yourself, I just lit $50 on fire. That's what I did. I just set money on fire and watched it.
No. I did not light $50 on fire. Bill O'Brien and Pete Golding's incompetence lit my $50 on fire. Okay, they should have never lost to LSU. Jaden Daniels is not that good, but that's a conversation for another time. Josh?
Well, that was also, I really don't want to go on a rant here, but I don't like to call it a college football playoff. It's a college football invitational. Okay, a playoff has rules to allow you to get in. A playoff is a bunch of old people in a room picking the teams that can make the most money. If Ohio State loses and they don't get into the Big Ten championship and they don't win the Big Ten championship, they have no right being in the playoffs. If they go to the Big Ten championship and they lose to Iowa, if they lose the Big Ten, if they can't win their conference, they shouldn't be in. Right, I think, and first of all, like everybody keeps harping on TCU. Oh, TCU isn't as good as Ohio State or Michigan. It's very clear. We don't really know that because I'm an Ohio State fan, but even I recognize that the schedule is sharp and soft. Right, and that's not all their fault. Notre Dame should have been better than they were, and they weren't. But I don't want to talk shit about Michigan, but Michigan's schedule sucked too, right? And every time that they've gone up against someone who's been decent. Ohio State struggled last week. They struggled against Northwestern in the weather. They're not super dominant. You can say the same thing about Georgia too, right? Georgia struggled. They didn't blow all the doors off of Kent State, and everybody seems to forget that. Alabama, they lose, but I think it's like the first time in like 10 years they had a SEC in conference back-to-back away games where it didn't end in Vanderbilt. Like it was something strange like that. When you manipulate the conference like that, or when you manipulate your schedule like that, it makes teams look a lot better, right? I mean, I'm an Ohio State fan, and I could recognize that if you blow the doors off of Arkansas State and Toledo, but someone else struggles with, Cincinnati, a decent mid-major, one looks better than the other because your casual college football fan doesn't realize that there's a giant gap there. I mean, the best team on Michigan's out-of-conference schedule was Connecticut, right? You know what I mean? And I'm not bashing them. And Ohio State is no better. But that's my problem with the playoff. If you don't win your conference, I also appreciate the old school regional value of college football too. I like the idea of, hey, the Big Ten champion gets in, the SEC champion gets in, the Big 12 champion gets in, the Pac-12 champion, or whatever it may be, right? And I like that they're expanding the playoffs. I think we're going to run into a lot of the same issue. But yeah, if you don't win your conference, I don't think you should be in, right? Because that means Ohio State's going to lose the two best teams. They're going to lose to the two best teams they played by a large margin. So they beat nobody. If they lose these next two games, they beat nobody good. They beat nobody good, right? We can sit here and say that. So why would they deserve to be in?
The only issue with that is that Georgia, if they somehow lose to LSU, the committee's still going to put them in.
Yeah.
For sure, but I don't agree with it. Is my
that's the whole problem with the entire system the way they have it set up, right? Now, for me, being the guy that looks at all the money and TV ratings and all that sort of jazz, the school that could get SOL on this shit out of luck will still be USC because you've got that power conference mindset. We're only going to see one SEC team now. TCU stays unbeaten. They're in. Whoever wins this game, they're in. But for the sake of TV ratings and all that other sort of good stuff, the one-loss team, they'll want to see Michigan versus Ohio State again. Just like they wanted Alabama versus Georgia. But this is their mindset.
But doesn't that feel kind of dirty?
Yes, it is dirty.
I'll use Ohio State because I'm an Ohio State fan, writer, all that shit. If Ohio State beats Michigan and they lose to Iowa in the Big Ten championship, do they deserve to be in? I mean, does that make like it feels gross, right? Like
It feels gross.
finish the task at hand, and I just
There's not a perfect system. There's
And
not going to be a perfect system for college football, however, because
And I want to be clear too, because I'm shitting on the Big Ten teams because I'm a Big Ten fan, so I feel like saying that makes me unbiased. But the SEC is even worse because they don't even try. Alabama hasn't played. This is the first. Texas was the first game Alabama played out of like a neutral site game, and like what since Nick Saban's been there, like they're playing the Citadel the week before the rivalry week.
I mean, did you just watch that dominating game that they had? Austin P. What?
Austin P.
Lee Corso brought up such a good point last week on College Game Day. Says the games in November, the ones that you remember, and
that's right. They always have been.
They always have been, but
it doesn't matter for the SEC.
Like, can someone tell me like? And it's kind of sad because I know TCU might be that one-loss team that gets knocked out too, even though, let's face it, their non-conference schedule wasn't strong either. I mean, does anyone know where Tarleton is located?
No.
I do. And in fact, they are a proud member of the Southland Conference. Their rivals
until TCU.
Their rivals include people like Sam Houston State, of course, right?
Yeah.
Now, Sam Houston State is leaving the conference because they're going to go FBS. But
Conference USA.
Yep, there you go.
But even with their schedule being bad, you can't definitively. There's so many teams in college football in the landscape. You can't definitively tell me that they're bad based off of their schedule because everybody's schedule. I mean, they did play. They went out and played Colorado. That's a Power 5 school that they played away. They did play at SMU, so they got a couple games where they played away. I think Ohio State and Michigan are going to have like 4. I think Michigan's going to have 5 away games because of the
Colorado has 1 win this year. I mean,
But I would
like to add,
Ohio State has like 4 away games every year. Is that right? Meanwhile, Stanford's playing like 6 or 7, or Colorado's playing 6 or 7. So a lot of those teams that have 1 win, they're bad.
I say this about all of these big name schools. I would love to see somebody have the guts to say, guess what, boys, you're all going to play 6 games on the road where we want you to play. That means Alabama, you're coming to Notre Dame Stadium at the end of November. You're going to come and play in some cold weather. You want to prove that you're the best? You come play some real football weather, not that warm, soft stuff that you're always used to. You come up, or even to the shoe, or to the big house. I don't care where it ends up being. You come play in the same sort of conditions that the schools up north have to play in, and prove that you can do it. That's why I never minded Miami back in the days when it was the Catholics versus the convicts, because they had the balls to come up to Notre Dame Stadium and play, and not early either. They came up and played late.
Yeah.
A couple things to clarify. One, TCU didn't schedule Colorado. They scheduled Carl Dorrell, which is an automatic W no matter where he is in his career.
I'm not defending.
If you are playing the brought beer and drinking game, you now must take your 3rd drink.
Yes.
Sorry, that was not a point. That was just a shot at Carl Dorrell. Secondly, that is the bowl eligible UConn Huskies. We just want to make that very clear.
Yeah.
And thirdly, playing Austin P, playing Notre Dame on the road, it's like, I mean, I don't know if those are that different in competition. I'm just kidding about that. But you guys make an excellent point.
Cut that out.
I know. I want to expand upon that.
Ohio State should never went to the playoffs in 2016, too. I want to be very clear about that. I said it both times back then, too. Ohio State should not have went to the playoffs in 2016, and they pretty much proved that when they got their ass slapped. So
was that the 38-0 game against Clemson?
I think it was, but they didn't even go to the Big Ten championship. But Penn State won it with 2 losses.
Penn State won it.
That's right.
Because JT was short.
They beat Washington that year in like the Peach Bowl or something like that, right? Like the Penn State team. I forget. But I want to ask this question for all of you guys since we've kind of rang up this huge debate about college football playoffs. You guys are all right. I want to make that very clear. It is an absolute mess right now. Do you think, it doesn't matter how many teams are available, 4, 12, whatever it is, do you think we should keep the voting committee? Should we go back to a computer system like the BCS, or is there something in between that we can create to make this somehow less biased?
I'll start with our latest guest, Ryan. You first on what would be your dream way of working this out?
See, I think you can if you want to go. I don't think you should go strictly computers because that'll be hell. I think if you want to go and do a mix, that's fine. But I think you still have to have the human element to understand. Like when we have 12 teams, there's always going to be who was 13 and who was 12. Like who should have been and who should not have been. We're always going to have that element that's going to happen. But I think the human element of what we're seeing, and I know this year it's kind of a wacky year. I mean, TCU is undefeated, and they're kind of throwing us up. LSU is above USC, which I don't think they should be right now, personally. But that's just me. But I still think you have to have a human element when it comes to putting these rankings out there.
Oh, I agree with the human element being needed. The problem that I always end up having with this, though, is the committee. Who are these guys to say this? I don't see their great expertise in any of this, and it comes down to their biases again. That's the whole problem. That's the part of the human element that needs to be eliminated.
Yeah,
I agree.
Josh, what do you think?
I want all I want is to figure. I don't know what it is. I'm not smart enough, right? That's why I'm sitting where I'm sitting. But there just needs to be rules. If there's 12 teams, maybe you take in if you win your conference, you get a home game. If you lose your conference, you get a away game. That's 10 teams. And you take 2 mid-major teams or non-power 5 group of 6 teams or whatever. I don't know if that's the answer. It's just that's what I want. I want there to be. I don't want to have to rely on a bunch of old dudes who've watched 2 games because they didn't watch all college football games. They don't, right? That they're just not. And it's to decide the fate of all these colleges. It doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem right to me. So I would much rather be like, hey, if you win, your conference, you're automatically in. If you lose your conference, there's power 5, 10, you get an away game. Something like that. I just want there to be rules. I want there to be.
Yeah.
This is the layout. You're not going to get screwed. That's all I'm asking for. I think that eliminates all the bias because that's the issue. And Ohio State is just as guilty as receiving bias towards polls and rankings. Big money, play no away games. It doesn't matter if their schedule is soft. I'm aware of the bias that Ohio State receives in all these rankings, but I can recognize it's bullshit. I mean, it just needs to be changed. That needs to be taken out of it completely.
Absolutely. And like I said, if there's somebody that actually took control over this thing, hey, Michigan, guess what? You're going to Boone, North Carolina, and you're going to play App State again.
Down. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it, right? Let's get these things happening. It's not about the revenge. It's not about the first result and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, we beat that game.
Yeah, exactly. But the whole thing is that the way that they've got this structured, these conferences, the top boys, they're gonna take care of the bottom feeders within their conference. They don't get as much competition as you want to see all these teams have to get there. And that's what I've always said. Because they're allowed to get away with scheduling these schools that they're going to beat the living daylights out of, right? That's what makes it ridiculous to say that they're so much better than anybody else. Because they haven't faced a stiff level of competition to get there. At least in the college basketball, Duke plays Kansas right off the hop and all that sort of stuff, right? You don't get that enough in the college football realm because of the conference, the way that they've set it up within each conference, right?
Well, and I don't have any issue because I know that a lot of the lifeblood for like a MAC school, they need to lose to Ohio State.
They need it.
But for you to be scheduling nothing but that is awkward, right? And I think that the Big Ten has done a better job of not scheduling for cater. You've seen Ohio State have more away games recently, and there's a lot of back-to-backs, and a lot of times they put them in prime time away. So, but the SEC is pretty guilty of that, and people don't realize how hard those kind of games are. I mean, a lot of you guys were there. A lot of you guys were there. When you played a back-to-back away game, it hits you different, right? It just hits you. It doesn't matter who you're playing. It hits you different. You saw that. Ohio State struggled against Northwestern. I don't care if the weather was good. They were not going to beat that spread because it's hard to play an away back-to-back.
Notre Dame plays Purdue, and then the next week, because it's Thanksgiving week, we got to go out to California and play the Trojans right after, right? And it's just like, oh my, that's not fun.
your schedule's out of whack, your sleep's out of whack. It's just not the same thing. But I do think that the conference expansions is going to help a little bit with that, right? So we add USC and UCLA. So you would think that maybe the non-conference schedule gets smaller and the in-conference schedule gets bigger. I don't know how they're going to work that out, but more people, more larger competition in that pool should help eliminate some of that bias and make the tunnel vision to the playoff a little bit more clear. But
but then we all know. Then we also know who else is going to be coming to the Big Ten, and it's not going to stop with just USC and UCLA.
No, that's correct.
They won't be able to handle the cold.
Notre Dame's coming to the Big Ten. I mean, it's a fate. That's coming. That it's an absolute must. The way that the whole system is set up, Notre Dame will be in the Big Ten.
Side note for all Bruins fans, UCLA is currently trailing the prestigious and dominant University
Cal.
of Berkeley 21-17 at halftime. So I'm sure the trip to the Big Ten is going to be a fun journey when they got to go play Iowa in the middle of November. So that's going to be an interesting prospect as well. Wow, I just thought about that. UCLA is going to travel to Iowa. That sounds worse than death. Wow, that is.
And so, for the new system that's coming in place, it's supposed am I wrong in this? But is it supposed to be each winner from Power 5 conference gets in?
It's supposed to be that, and then
So if you're like UC, for the Pac-12, like Oregon, for example, if you're Oregon, why would you leave?
Right.
Like you're going to be I mean, who else in the Pac-12 besides Utah is really going to compete? And so I just think of that. I'm like, USC and UCLA leaving, but it's like, you guys probably should stay because I think you would have had a better chance doing something in your conference than going to the Big Ten where it's cold. You're going to hate it. We're going to enjoy going across country, where it's nice and warm. You're going to hate when it's cold.
Yeah. And then you get the whole other factor with that because for the Pac-12, you're gonna have to elevate the Fresno states, the San Diego states. You think Oregon's not going to have a field day with them?
Right.
But I mean,
sometimes they won't.
No, sometimes they won't. Right.
But won't the almighty dollar still make them want to go to a larger conference?
Exactly.
With the, what I mean? So Oregon, even if they're pounding the Pac-12 year in and year out, going to the playoffs every year.
You got plenty of money from
Nike.
Nike anyways.
I don't know, and I don't know all the. I don't know all the intricate. That's where I fail as a fan or an analyst. Is I don't know the financial implications, right? Just like I had the conversation about scheduling months ago with another person, and they're well more versed on how it works in the MAC, right? And they were like, dude, that can't go away because then you kill the MAC. And I didn't know that. I stupidly thought I'll be fine. That's not how it works. So there's a lot of things I don't know on the financial aspect of it.
Yeah, I just think when it comes to like Oregon and like Phil Knight, for example, he's gonna have a say in anything with Oregon.
For sure.
If Oregon's always winning the Pac-12 and always making it to the playoffs, he's going to say, why are we going to leave? We're always getting there. It's good for the brand that we're always making it.
And he wouldn't be wrong.
No, exactly. So I know you're right. I don't know anything about financials either, but I know Phil Knight is like, hey, Oregon is what I'm building. So
For sure. I would agree with that.
The whole problem once you start talking about a Cincinnati or an Oregon or a Utah or any of these other schools that are outside of the traditional big name, that's the big problem. They are not the traditional big names. The TV networks absolutely know that their biggest ratings are going to be with this school versus that school. It's set in stone. How do you overcome that? I have no idea. But the mindset is there, right? I mean, for me, all those years when we did have Michigan scheduled, I despised it because what I should have been at that point in time, they were like a 1-2 or 1-4 or 2-5. Michigan versus Notre Dame for a national championship would have been so incredible. But it couldn't happen because they were scheduled early. That would eliminate one of them right off the bat. You're done.
Yeah, so a couple things real quick on what you guys said. I want to get your thoughts on this. Oregon, of course, is tied to Phil Knight, and they go where Phil Knight takes them. Also, Phil Knight's 84, so he wants a national championship now. The conference move does not benefit Oregon. Oregon hasn't made the college football playoffs since the first year at its inception, so I don't think he wants to increase competition because of that.
I didn't realize that.
Also, could we possibly see, on average, the SEC and the Big Ten with these new conference realignments send 3 teams each annually to the playoffs? Or do you guys think that's extreme? I'll kick it off with you, Josh. What do you think?
Sorry?
About that statement that the Big Ten and the SEC, when it goes to a 12-team playoff, they could send 3 teams each annually to the Big Ten.
I don't think that they should. I think you can take the 2 teams that go to the conference. First of all, it brings up the problem. If you're going to make the playoffs as the 3rd team of the Big Ten, why would you want to play in the conference championship? Why wouldn't you want the extra bye week to not play against someone who should be tough? It doesn't. I feel like I feel like you lose some of the emphasis to win your games. So I disagree with that. In the college football landscape, there's over 130 teams. It's big enough to where you shouldn't have to do that. You know what I mean? I would much rather see Ohio State play. And sometimes everybody always talks about, the playoff is full of poundings and blowouts, and that's true. That's 100% true. But you're getting that with 1 versus 4, and sometimes even 1 versus 2 in the national championship, anyways. So let's roll the dice. Let's see if the Air Force can beat Ohio State. You know what I mean? Let them in. What do you hurt? It's worth a shot. Everybody else, we just talked about Ohio State getting their ass beat 38-0. There's nothing more embarrassing than that, right? Let's open up the field. Let's see what we can do. I don't know.
And I believe the way that they've got the 12 set up, Brock, that you're not going to see more than 2 from a conference in. Just the way that they're setting this up.
Yeah, have they emphasized that it's conference champs or what other team? Like, I haven't seen enough from that.
Yeah, from the way they're setting this up, it's to me it looks like if you see it, you're only going to see 2 teams from a conference get in.
But if you end the season today, Penn State would make it.
Yeah,
Penn State would be in, and so you would have Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State all make it. So,
but
I don't
again,
see Penn State losing to Michigan State, but I just.
But we haven't reached it. We haven't reached the conference championship, of course, and that's the conference championship would eliminate the 3rd team, right?
Well, let's just say we guarantee. Let's just say Ohio State beats Michigan, beats Iowa. You're going to have Ohio State, Michigan, because the committee will not push Michigan below 12 from 1 loss. They just would not do that. And Penn State, I believe, beats Michigan State this weekend. So you would have 3 teams that make it.
But again, because of the 5 conferences, right? You're eliminating that possibility of the 3rd team. That's what I think they're getting at.
I don't think you are, because if you 5 conferences times 2 is 10. So do you have that possibility of a 3rd? I'm not saying that they should eliminate. It's that's what I'm saying. The possibility is there.
It exists.
Like SEC
but what they're trying to do though is get that possibility out of there.
Yeah, it won't. Like I personally, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see.
And like you said earlier, though, this is where we're going to get into that 13th team may have deserved it more than 12. That's where it's going to.
Yeah.
There's always going to be
I don't want to see that.
Right? You know what
I mean? But I don't want to see 3 from 1 conference. I don't. I want to see 2 from each conference and at large a group of 5 team that they went 11-1 or they went undefeated. Put them in, like give them a chance. We do this for college basketball. We got teams that like last year. Michigan should not have made the tournament last year, but we did, and we made it to the Sweet 16 because we looked like garbage last year in the tournament or before the tournament. So give these teams a shot. Give it a group of 5 team a shot. Cincinnati proved all the doubters wrong last year. They made it. They got beat by Alabama, but they made it. And so I don't want to see 3 from each from conferences make. I want to only see 2.
It's weird. The culture around college basketball, people love watching the small schools and rooting on the small schools. But in the culture of college football, it's Air Force is a good team, right? Air Force is a really fun team to watch. Out of my circle, for avid college football people, 3 people have watched an Air Force game. There's these gatekeepers where they just assume that those teams suck, right? And 9 times out of 10, Ohio State is going to beat the dog shit out of that team. But all it takes is that one time to make a pretty cool memory. right? I mean, you saw UCF beat Auburn, you saw Boise State beat Oklahoma. That's pretty cool. I'm not saying that the playoffs should be filled with those teams, but it doesn't I don't think it lessens the product to give an undefeated University of Texas San Antonio a shot. I don't think it does. I'm always going to remember Jared Spransky and Ian Johnson, right? But I don't remember. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
No, I think the expansion is. I think it's good. I think you have people that are going to like. I'm a huge underdog story person. Like I love watching underdogs try and compete in games. So you're going to have more people watch. Oh, UTSA makes it. Let's see what they can do. And I think when you have this expansion, and I've said this before, and I'm sure this will happen. When you have this expansion from 4 to 12, that talent that is so top heavy with Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State is going to spread because these high school kids know I can go somewhere else and still make the playoffs and even go to a possible group of 5 school. I could even do that or go to a lower tier Power 5 school. Who knows? But it'll be good for the sport for the have 12 teams. I hope they can get it correct and somehow. I don't know. That's just me.
So I agree with everything you said. It would be interesting to see how the recruitment spreads because I think that the NIL might kill that. I mean,
unfortunately, yeah.
I mean, if you're the only one athlete at Ohio University has an NIL deal, and they've let him lease a car during his career at Ohio, and I think it's like a Kia Sorento, which is cool. But CJ Stroud's driving a Benz for free. It's like so. I don't know if you're going to value it, or they're always going to value that dollar over, over trying to win. That's just how that's football, right?
I'm even more harsh when it comes to the NCAA and football because I am a Notre Dame fan. That GPA, the requirements that we have to get into there, it's a privilege to be your Fighting Irish. It's a privilege to be a Wolverine, a Trojan, etc. It was the student athlete. The whole student thing has gone so far now. Doesn't matter one iota, right?
Yeah.
And that's a shame because that's what guys my age were brought up on. They were student athletes, but the student part was the important part, and that's completely gone.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
And my system, the one that I dreamed up in my head, was the 5 champions, right? And then after the 5 champions, this is where the computer comes in. The 3 top ranked, regardless of wherever, right? Those next 3 in, and then the top 2 ranked non-Power 5, a group of 5, what do we call them, right? So AAC, Mountain West, whatever. Those 2 champions get in, and now the committee can have its fun, right? So we get at least 8 before the committee gets its grubby little paws in the process. The 5 win, and that's how they get in. And then, the rankings just automatically tell you which the computer can do, right? The computer can say, here are the next 3 teams. I'm fine with them. And then the next 4, the 2, what do you call it? Sorry, the one at large or whatever is determined by the computer, and then the 2 non-Power 5s get in. And now the last 4, sure, committee.
What my host was in a sprint speech and now left. So moving on.
Yeah, that was the old fat finger issue there. But that was my particular solution to this problem is that you use the wins, to get your first 5 and then the 2 non-Power 5. Those 7, that's just you win and get in, right? You win your comp. Then, like I said, the computer says, here's the next highest ranked team, regardless of where they're from. So if it ends up being an extra team from one of the Power 5s, I can live with it. If it ends up being a non-Power 5, I'm super excited. And then the committee, sure, you can have the next 4. And if they decide to pack it with a bunch of 2-loss teams from Power 5 conferences, which I guess is what their programming would lead them to do, I'll just have to live with it, I guess.
Yeah, like I said before, it's so much harder to do in football versus the basketball world. It is so much harder.
Yes.
And
it's hard because they made it harder. It doesn't have to be harder.
It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. No.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. Right?
They don't follow their own rules that they put in place. Every
Thank
year
you.
they just do what they want. And
Yep.
that is the main problem with this whole thing. It's like you say you have rules. Oh, well, conference championship. Okay, but then 2016 Ohio State got it. And then what? 1 year Alabama got in. They didn't win the
That's right.
conference.
When
They
they
didn't
get
even
to
play in the
They
conference
didn't make
championship
it
game.
past-
They didn't
Georgia
play
got
in their
last-
conference championship game.
But
Yeah.
it's like when you don't follow the rules that you put in place, that's what pisses us off as fans. That's it.
exactly.
I mean, you can look at an example last year. I mean, Alabama won it in the SEC championship game. John Mechie, who's everybody thought was a late first round prospect. Jamison Williams go down. Well, then they got to go play Georgia again. It's like, dude, we already overcame this. You know what I mean? It's like fighting that big boss in a video game and then him just going back to life. It's like, dude, that sucks, man. You know what I mean? I kind of felt for Alabama. Was Georgia the best team last year? Probably, but
No.
that kind of blows that Alabama got. I feel like Alabama got rarely. You're never gonna hear that coming out of my mouth. Alabama got screwed a little bit last year, right? You know what I
I
mean?
think Georgia was the best team last year.
Wow.
I agree.
So I
I
think
agree that Georgia was the
I
best
disagree.
team.
because here was my thing with Georgia last year was that the entire year, I think we all could see in the rankings and how they played. Oh, it was just Georgia, then everybody else, and then the one game, Alabama did expose them, and then you're thinking, oh shoot, now they're going to probably do it again. But yet I know they lost their receivers, so I don't want to say the receivers are only. I get that, but it's Alabama, and they reload with potential other first rounders.
Then this year,
So, yeah. But what I'm saying is Georgia lost that game because I picked Georgia to win the title game after they beat the crap out of Michigan. I picked them to win because they knew what they did wrong against Alabama, and then they went and did what they had to do to win.
I know. I'm not debating whether or not Georgia was the best team in college football last year. They certainly could have been, probably were. I bet on Georgia to beat Alabama. That was the smart thing to do, especially with the cluster injuries at the receiver position. But all I'm saying is it doesn't. I mean, we saw Sexy Rexy in the Chicago Bears in the Super Bowl. Were they were they the second best team in the NFL? You know what I mean? Like that's the deal.
Oh,
Right?
I'm a Colts fan, so I love that game.
you go through, you beat what's in front of you, and then you go on. You shouldn't have to beat what's in front of you, and then they go, wow, let's give them a do-over. What? Like that's not, that just kind of seems shitty.
Maybe the committee should have put him 1-4, get that out of the way, and then they go to the title game.
That maybe I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I just thought
right.
that was kind of shitty, right? And that's not the best example because it's Alabama. Everybody automatically hates Alabama.
But we can see it. We can see it happen this year. If certain things fall into shape, I'm telling you, they will do a redo with Michigan State and Ohio State faster than they will put in other teams, only because it will be such a draw.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Okay.
awful. That's just that. That's not how it should be.
But that's the reality of it, and we've seen it happen.
Yeah.
We saw it happen last year.
As Michigan fans, and I'm sure Ohio State fans as well, we're rooting. If whoever loses, that team is going to be rooting for USC to lose. Going to be rooting for TCU to lose.
That's right.
Georgia to beat LSU. Because the reality is we could both still make it. And
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is the one conference. It is the one conference outside of the SEC that the committee would allow it to have happen because they know the ratings that would come in for a rematch between Michigan and Ohio State top any other ratings that they could get.
Hand to God, if Ohio State can't finish the job tomorrow, I will not be rooting for them to be in the playoffs. Hand to God, they shouldn't be in the playoffs. You can't have that Charmin soft schedule, lose to the only good team on the schedule, and then have me root for you to be. I'm a fan, but I'm not going to do that. That's not.
I know.
Right. That's not
but-
right.
Josh, you're a better man than me.
But that's how you see it.
Yes, Brock. We all know
I
that.
can't bitch about
Josh is
Alabama
a
over
better
Ohio
person
State,
than you.
right?
That is
Because
a factual statement.
Especially with Ohio State, because if let's just say Michigan does beat them, and Ohio State they get thrown into the playoff
Yep.
because everything happens, you're gonna have a healthy team. You're gonna have Jackson Smith and Jibba playing. You're gonna have your running backs. Like you're gonna have like that. So you're gonna have what should be a top 4 team when healthy in the playoffs.
And that's shitty, right? Because that's all part of the process.
But
meanwhile, Michigan's getting beat up again in the Big Ten championship. Because I know they're probably going to play Iowa, right? Who's not
What is
great.
it? You in Iowa?
But that's still
Iowa's losing to Nebraska.
Iowa's losing to Nebraska.
That's still a tough team that you don't want to. You know what I mean? Like still another game, right?
I'm
It's
good with
another
Iowa.
game. It's not a top team. I mean,
Well, okay, it's a physically tough team.
Man, I saw
much
because
like
that's all they know how to do. They can't throw the ball past 2 yards.
No, they for whatever reason they have a strong dislike for quarterbacks that are able to accurately throw the football. That's something that I just don't like in Iowa. It's not what they're into.
Iowa really dislikes quarterbacks if their skin is darker than mayonnaise. Like that's the issue with Iowa. Like I want to make that
and preferably at least 6'3". They are tall. They are tall, but
immobile Caucasian man in the high school recruiting market. Iowa does not want you.
All I know is that when those guys came out of the tunnel, they went to go stretch. I went, God damn, those are some big boys, and I would not want to be hit by that. I mean, there's a lot of better. There's a lot of better Big Ten teams that are they look a lot smaller than I. I mean, I just wouldn't want to play it. That's another strain on your body that Ohio State wouldn't have to deal with.
Exactly.
I'm just saying. I think Illinois is going to make. I think Illinois is going to upset a team in the Big Ten championship game. I'm not saying they will. I have them on alert. After they played against Michigan, and after we see what Cam Brown, and after we see like that, if that happens, that could throw a wrench in our current college football playoff debate. That could ruin everything. Because let me throw a scenario out for you guys. Right, Tennessee losing kind of messed up, but also cured like several issues. Because Tennessee, if they won out, they probably would have been in. Right.
Yeah.
So Tennessee, by losing, they knocked themselves out. If the winner of Ohio State and Michigan loses in the Big Ten championship game, that could either propel both teams in or also knock both teams out, depending what happens in the rest of the college football, right? Because let's say in this argument, Georgia wins, beats LSU, so they're automatically number 1. TCU wins out, so they would elevate to number 2 in this scenario. Who fills in 3? Who fills in 4? Would it be USC and one of them? Would it be both of them? Would it be USC somebody else? I don't know.
Does USC win out?
Scenario that would be really interesting.
Does USC win out in that situation?
Yeah, so USC wins out and they win the Pac-12.
They're in at 3.
They're in at 3.
They're in no matter what.
So they're in at 3. Let's say for argument's sake, Ohio State wins tomorrow, loses in the Big Ten championship game. Who gets the 4th spot? Michigan or Ohio State?
But you in your scenario, you still have an SEC champ. You still in your scenario, Georgia's still undefeated, correct? Am I understanding this? Okay, TCU is still undefeated.
Correct.
Okay, and then South Carolina. USC wins the Pac-12, and they've only had 1 loss, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, where's Clemson at?
Not see.
Who cares?
That's the thing because
who cares where Clemson's at?
If Ohio State loses to Illinois, a 7-4 Illinois team, and Clemson beats South Carolina, who they suck, but they got this perception now because they beat Tennessee, and then they beat who in the ACC championship game?
North Carolina would probably be Clemson.
Who's tied right now with NC State?
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't. Who's to say? Why? If you can't beat up. First of all, I don't think anybody's losing Illinois. But if they were,
I don't know.
What's the argument? Why couldn't you make a strong? Why is it laughable that you would put in Clemson over? And I'll pick on Ohio State because I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible. Ohio State beats Michigan. That's the best win. Then they lose to a 7-4 Illinois team. Do they deserve it over Clemson?
So I think what the committee is going to do as well in that situation, Clemson got the brakes beat off them by Notre Dame. Ohio State beat Notre Dame. So I think that's what because I think in that scenario, I think Ohio State gets 4. I think they're going to say, well, they beat Michigan, Notre Dame beat Clemson, and then Ohio State beat Notre Dame. I think they would just, and again, it's also a bias because I think the committee is so Ohio State.
For sure, you were for sure 100% right. I just don't know if you are for sure 100% right. But if it was me, that's just not how I would do it.
No, I agree. No, I
Remember too, Ohio State played Notre Dame first
Yeah.
quarterback's first start, head coach's first game. Clemson, but you know what I mean? Like there's just that's the beauty of college football. There's so many variables. There's so much growth. I just wouldn't take that into consideration.
that was a bad team at the time.
They were a bad team at the time. Yeah.
I'm not going to. First of all,
At the time, they're good now, but they had
First-
lost to Marshall, lost to Stanford this year.
you don't get
Shout out to the Fighting Charles Huffs, and shout out to Kalen LeBourne, who's from my hometown of Virginia Beach, Virginia. But yes, Marshall didn't just win. Marshall dominated.
They pounded my Irish. They pounded them.
But
It was
they are a different team now than they were back then.
completely. But even in week one, Ohio State didn't do what so many people thought going into the season. They completely blow up the Fighting Irish. They did not.
Hey, I was on this very podcast, and exactly what I said was going to happen happened.
Yeah, I mean, that was a pretty damn close game compared to what a lot of people thought it was going to be.
Yeah. But how about this? How many weeks after that Stanford lost did Stanford beat Clemson? It wasn't that long after, right? Like it was 1 or 2.
Notre Dame. You mean Notre Dame beating Clemson?
Yeah. Like when Notre Dame lost to Stanford, how many weeks after that did they beat Clemson?
I think it was like
Oh, that was
It was like three
3 weeks.
Yeah, so
3 weeks.
it wasn't that long far away from them losing to a Stanford team that got smoked by Utah and then beating what was the number 1 team in the ACC. So then how does that? I'm just throwing that out there. Like when it comes to the Clemson argument, and also I think we all can agree Clemson is not a national championship caliber team.
Well, in the Marshall loss too, everybody keeps harping on that. That's a bad loss, but that was also the very next game after Ohio State. It's kind of like that.
Yeah.
I'm not making
and they lost Buckner
a
that game.
hangover when you play teams like Ohio State, Alabama, Michigan, right?
Well, you lose your starting quarterback, which Notre Dame did, and that's going to affect them. And it was a mess. That's basically.
Well, I think, and that was pretty easy. If you're a gambler too, that's a pretty easy bet to make, right? Like, okay, they're going to have a hangover because they just got their ass kicked. You know, because they were close too. If they would have got their ass kicked, the attitude would have been a little bit different. But Notre Dame almost pulled off the W against Ohio State, so it wasn't like they walked down. You know, I think that gives you a little bit more of a hey, this sucks. We were this close, but then you go into Marshall, get your ass slapped. I mean, you know, that's been one of the betting facets for years.
But again, like I said earlier in this, there's your case. Clemson went and had to come to Notre Dame in November.
Yeah.
What happened to them?
Yeah.
They got walloped, right?
Yeah.
That's why I always say Georgia, Alabama, you come up north. You come up north to you want to tell me that you're the best in the land, then you shouldn't care where you're playing the game. Don't give me your garbage that you only belong down there. You come up north.
But I think that'll also be a cool part of the upcoming playoffs too. Is that the first round is going to be on campuses, right? Was that the deal?
Yeah, it's on campus. So can you imagine them having that scenario where they would actually have to come to the big house or to the shoe?
I know. Imagine that scenario where like Notre Dame loses a critical playoff game in front of touchdown deep. Jesus, man, that would
Stop it.
Which is cool for multiple reasons too, because I know that a lot of these players' families want to travel out. And the more games you add, the more times they have to travel. I know there was an Ohio State player where their parents they took a loan out just to travel to the bowl game, and I'm like, dude, that sucks. I think I remember right too. That's what Chase Young got busted for. He was borrowing money.
You borrow money.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah.
And under the rules at the time, violation, right?
Yeah. So I think on-campus games is also favorable for college football as a whole, and also, the community that you're supposed to be helping.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to everybody. This was not supposed to happen. We were not supposed to spend almost an hour on a debate about the college football playoffs, but that's what I love about like the pure organic love that everybody here clearly has for college football. Ryan, this is obviously your first timer. Greg, you're technically a first timer. We've done other stuff with you. You're first time in the show. You have standing invitations to return. If Michigan makes the college football playoff, Ryan, count on coming back. Josh, we'll bring you back either way, just because we love having you on. You can either come on and just be all sad, Josh, or you can come back and be happy, Josh. I'm fine with either one.
Always happy, man. Always happy.
Yeah, there we go.
And I just want
We
Ryan to know,
couldn't
too.
tell there. We got a couple topics, and that happiness started to fade a little bit.
But I just want Ryan to know too. I was at a Roosters when Illinois and Michigan were playing, and I was rooting. And I was the only one in the bar, and I stood strong. I'm rooting for Michigan. I want to see this matchup happen. And people were not very friendly to me when they heard that, but I stood strong, rooting for Michigan.
Final.
Brett Bielema is not very friendly to the kids he recruits, so it's all.
Oh boy!
Final score tomorrow.
If you're playing the Rapier drinking game at home, you're now up to your fourth drink.
Greg was saying final score.
Final score.
Let's go final score predictions tomorrow. Ryan, we'll kick it off.
Final
with
score
you.
predictions.
What's your
I will
guys'
start with Ryan, since he's newer here of the two.
I want the score to be different than what I'm going to say. I think it's going to come down to a last-second field goal. I'm going to go 31-28 Ohio State. Just want to say last year, I was at my parents' house. My dad has this big Michigan flag that he put outside. And the day before the game, I said, if we win, I will grab that flag, sprint down this street, chanting the Michigan song. Boy, that was great. I did it. Oh my! I was so out of breath. I just was grunting and it was the best day of my life. Just kidding. Anyways, but yeah, 31-28 Ohio State. Just being realistic.
Okay. Same question to you, Mr. Josh Keatley, friend of the show.
Man, Brock's score, I thought when he said it, I kind of gasped a little because I thought it was too high. I do think Ohio State beats the spread of 7.5, and I do think that Vegas has the total right on the money at 56. I don't know. I want to say 35-21 because the math fits and they beat the spread, but that's probably just me being lazy. But I'll stick with it. Ohio State 35-21.
Okay. Anybody else have one day? Brock, you threw yours out there. Do you have one also, Greg?
Yeah, I've got it like Ryan. I've got a closer. I think that it ends up being a closer game, and I will say 30-27.
That's fair.
Okay.
Buckeyes.
You guys have this game a lot
Last
closer
second
than I
change.
do. Jeez.
Last second change, 30-21. I want to lower, just
Okay.
lower it a little bit. Just lower it a little bit.
Well, mine is going to be 38-21 OSU.
Oh wow.
Damn.
But here's the kicker. Though. I believe if they rematch in the College Football Playoff, I think Michigan takes in the College Football Playoff as long as they play in a dome and not outside, because I still get horror stories of those big Michigan linemen sweating in Florida. Good Lord. They were losing sweat.
Man, I think 38-21. I don't think we find a way in at that point.
No,
I just there's something about the M that just looks so right on the College Football Playoff commercials. That the
No, it
committees-
what are you talking about? Looks right.
But
Yeah.
it looks a lot better than ND. I can tell you that one. It should be N8 as in not happening.
But to see that that M and those two colors together, and no, it's just painful. That hat and the shirt and everything that I've been looking at, it just really
Greg, this
gets
one
to me.
actually happened.
And then having to watch them and scout their players without being completely biased against them. It's
Did
so
you like when
hard.
Mike Elson
That's
left
how
and
I
came
felt
to
last year
Michigan?
about Kyle Hamilton. I was like, this sucks seeing such a
See?
player play such a gaudy helmet. Like, that's
Greg,
how
did you like when Mike Elson left and came to Michigan?
Oh yeah, it was fine. That was all fine. That's all good.
I
don't
saw
worry.
some YouTuber go absolutely like berserk off.
Oh.
I was laughing at the video. It was a great video, but he went
No,
absolutely berserk.
As you
over it.
can tell, most of the stuff I say is tongue in cheek. So it's tongue is in cheek for the most part. But
as you can tell,
in college football, there's two teams in colleges that I just can't stomach. Period. In football, it is the Wolverines, and in basketball, it's Puke University that dumped 10 miles away from the most beautiful campus in basketball, Chapel Hill. But that's just how it is. We all have that one team that we really dislike, right?
Indeed. And on that somewhat vinegary but not so sweet note, I'm going to ask both Josh and, of course, Ryan. In fact, I'll start with Ryan. tell people where they can follow you on social media, where they can find your work, and what you're working on.
Oh man, what have I been working on too? Wow. So you can find me on social media at One Done Radio, just on Twitter. Unless Twitter dies or whatever happens there. I don't know.
And is it the word one or the number one?
The word one. So One Done, DUNNE Radio. You can find the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcasts. The show's there. Honestly, what I'm working on right now, I'm just trying to get some former athletes onto the show. I've had I've had Gus Farrat come onto the show.
Gus Farrat's great.
Yeah, I've had him. Had some sports writers come in, like Bob Ryan from ESPN.
Nice.
Jim Aiello of Indy Star. So I've had some people come in. I'm trying to keep them. I actually just reached out to Joey Harrington of former Oregon QB. I want to get him on. Hasn't gotten back to me yet, but just trying to have some of those guys on the show. I'm trying to, because I had a period where I was really doing like a lot, like guests every single week and sometimes every other episode. But then with my current work schedule, it's been a little tough. So I'm trying to get back into the swing of that.
Okay. And the same question to you, friend of the show, Josh Keeley. Where can people find your work? Where can people follow you, sir? What are you up to?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter at JoshKeeley16. My DMs are always open. I write for Buckeyes Wire. I'll be at the game tomorrow. Be doing the checkups, the updates, the photos, all that good stuff. So check me out during game day. Hopefully I can do a pretty good job of covering the game. I too have a podcast. It's not nearly as cool as yours or anybody here. Everybody's podcast is a little bit more advanced than what we got going on and around the gridiron. But we're still pulling it together. Me and my host, Nate Atkins, who writes for Bears Wire and also a former Valpo defensive end. So, we try. We just talk some shit. We don't have any guests yet because there's only 3 listeners, so we wouldn't want to waste anybody's time. But it's slowly growing in the right direction. So that's what I love.
Hey, start somewhere. Absolutely.
Yes, start somewhere. Right. You know what? You start booking guests. They don't have to be maybe like Gus Farrat level guests, but you can start booking some guests, and then you'll break through that 5 listener barrier, and before you know it, you'll be up to like 14.
Hey, it's everyone starts somewhere at the end of the day, and even if you got one person out there listening to your podcast, you got one person out there listening. Slowly build up every single time.
Indeed.
Exactly. Like for this show, shout out to my mom. She doesn't listen, but just hi, mom. and Josh, you gotta start somewhere. Like Jimbo Fisher started out as a graduate assistant, and now he's legalized bank robbing Texas A&M. So you always gotta start out somewhere.
Living the American dream.
I would love to get $88 million if I got fired. Jesus, that's the American dream.
That is the American.
Why would you coach anymore?
Why would you do anything anymore?
I don't think so. I just go on Fox. I'll go on Fox and comment every Saturday like Urban Meyer and just call it a day.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, and Greg, once again, tell people where they can find your work, where they can follow you on various and sundry social media.
Well, at teammbsmedia.com now, instead of the former name. At Greg Cowboys on Twitter. You'll see me do anything from the Cowboys mock drafts for the NFL, all kinds of other sundry articles, including my next one, which is another piece of not so favorable coverage for the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, the guy that I've despised for almost 30 years now. So things like that.
Okay, excellent.
I have a question for Greg, real quick. Greg, what do you think made Jerry Jones more mad? How the Cowboys have played in the playoffs since they've been left, or integration?
Well, that's part of what the article I wrote is about. So, but of course, Brock has to really go right to the. Let's put it this way. I do point out that in his latest tenure, there's only been one offensive and one defensive coordinator of color.
Yeah. Well, if you're playing the Brock Viera drinking game at home, You may want to switch to water first of all. Slow down, pace yourself.
You better go and get your local permit to buy a Texas Mickey.
Yeah, you
I
may
don't know
want
what that is, but that sounds illegal and scary.
It doesn't sound good, but yeah. So you have my permission. That last one, it can be straight water, right? Because I'm thinking about your health. Once again, I thank all of you. This show has only gone about an hour long, so that's awesome. But I don't care. It's great content. You guys are amazing. Josh, once again, standing invitation to return anytime there's anything, even tangentially related to Ohio State. And then now we have a Michigan person. So that'll be fun. You guys can be like a mismatched buddy cop film. Where like you clearly are the guy that goes by the book, Ryan, and then oh my God, you're constantly trying to like keep the captain from sacking Josh, clearly, who is a maverick, goes by his own rules. So as always, it is indeed a pleasure, gentlemen. This is the best part of my week. It really is. Everyone pretend that Brock and I did an X's and O's segment where we broke down how Auburn was going to try to attack.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah. So the key thing for the offense is to reach the end zone consistently. If they can do that, I have a good feeling about this football game.
Getting to see them use the triple option the way you laid out. That was
unbelievable.
Was it the pulling quarterback? Who thought of that?
Yes, there we go. Oh, wait. There's a graphic. Ta-da!
Whoa.
There we go. There we go.
See, the perfect way
now it's official.
to attack
now
this
it's
defense
official.
is to have that dog in you. If you have that dog in you, no scheme can stop you.
Love it.
Yeah, so now it's official. We had an X's and O's segment, so now I didn't lie to everyone. Once again, I cannot thank you all enough. This has really been awesome. I don't understand how this happened, that we ended up spending literally more than half the show on something that wasn't even a topic, but I love it. It's fantastic. Oh, wait, there's an outro. I'm going to play it for real this time before I forget, because I was going to. Oh, wait. Quick. Yeah, here it is. Ta-da!